Hello, and welcome to The Fool and the Philosopher.
The Philosopher and The Fool. It's meta.
I've had strange dreams of late. Actually, I've had terrifying dreams of late. I think the government is punishing me.
Mine have been pretty normal. I've been having very vivid dreams lately, to the extent that dreams are vivid, but it's been pretty normal.
So I have, what do you mean to the extent dreams are vivid?
I'm aware that they happen, and I kind of remember the feeling, but they fade quite fast.
Right, but while you're dreaming, they are real.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. I was wondering, like, you
Well, a lot of times dreams are quite fake to me.
Hmm.
I'm quite aware it's a dream.
Right, but does it still feel real?
No.
Okay.
It feels like a dream. There's the only way I can describe it, because there's nothing quite else like it.
Yeah, okay, I think I know what you mean. Yeah.
And I mean, one of the biggest tells that it's a dream is I'm not in pain in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, your mind is good at, like, defeating your logic, I think, because I thought that when I was younger, and then I, like, fell and skinned my knee, and I was like, oh, I'm not dreaming, and then I woke up and I was like, what the...
Well, it's weird, because with dreams, I can get into situations where I'm injured, and so I have the dread of being injured, but there is no pain.
Yeah, there was definitely pain in those.
Yeah, so for me, I don't have pain in my dreams.
Yeah. And I have a lot of hand pain lately in my dreams, which isn't fair.
But I think I relax a lot while I'm sleeping, and so it helps deal with a lot of muscle tension.
So
where you tense up.
Well, I have reason to, because I have some freaky dreams, like scary. So I guess it's a sleep paralysis demon, right?
Yeah.
Like literally, not
the meme, my sleep paralysis demon, or that's my sleep paralysis demon.
Yeah, which I think is, I think basically everyone probably has some variant of it.
Yeah, well, it's a blanket wrapping around my head.
Because you get paralyzed when you you get paralyzed when you dream, or when you sleep to an extent. Not always, but I don't think it's always anyways. So for me, the scariest dream I've ever had wasn't actually sleep paralysis, but the second and third and fourth, they are.
Yeah.
And so, like, 2 nights ago I had one, and it kind of ruined the last couple days for me.
Because you don't want to sleep?
No, I didn't sleep that night, essentially. And then I was really sore and tired the next day, and they're so disturbing that they keep me from feeling, like, I feel, if you go through a traumatic event, you feel unwell for, like, time. Not even dread, like, I'm not afraid of anything. It's just, like, if something bad happens to you, there's trauma, let's say. Trauma might be a bit overblown.
I don't, trauma's a good thing. Dread is trauma to me. Dread isn't fear.
Dread's anticipation, though, isn't it?
It's kind of anticipation. I sort of see it as an overall feeling of unpleasantness.
I see it as the term for anticipation and fear.
Oh, okay.
So I'd call it more anxiety, maybe, just generalized.
Yeah.
Trauma is a bit over, like, that's too strong a word.
Yeah.
But along that line, I don't know what a lesser form of trauma you would call, but something in there. But what the dreams tend to be is I'm in my bed and I wake up, obviously.
Yeah.
And I think it's always, or almost always, but I think it's always a parent standing outside my door, which I'm closer to than I am in real life, because my bed's actually way on the other side of my room. But like how room used to be at our dad's house, essentially, like where my bed was there, but like even slightly closer to the door. And they're just like, have the door open a crack, staring in at me. And they're saying things like, they're whispering things like, oh, I love you, or like, I'm so sorry. They're always apologizing. They're like looking and whispering, or like, oh, it's my darling, there's my child. There's like all these sort of like sickeningly sweet sort of things combined with apologies combined. So it's very grotesque.
Yeah.
And it's horrifying.
Yeah.
Because it's not that scary in one sense, but it plays on my real life experiences as well. Right? Like that's what really wrecks it, is that it's basically a metaphor for my life to an extent, and that makes it that much worse.
Yeah.
Because then I'm just, it's and the other thing is you have to separate dreams from reality, so you don't start
going insane.
Well, so I don't want to see our parents in that light, right?
Yes.
And so, and I don't think I do typically, but it is.
Yeah.
It's like a grotesque parody of life.
Dreaming used to be a lot simpler for me before Rousseau.
Rousseau?
Is he the guy that's like, what you do in your dreams reflects your morality? It's some French philosopher.
Yeah, it starts with an L.
Yeah.
It was like not Lamarck, that was a biologist.
But anyways, since reading that guy, I had to become way more moral in my dreams. Like, I don't steal, I don't fight unless it's in self-defense. Like, there's so much.
Yeah, I don't think it was Rousseau, but maybe it was. Rousseau I know more for his humans are evil and nature is perfect and that sort of thing.
Okay, yeah, it's not Rousseau then. But
it might have been. He did more than one thing, right?
But it's funny that it's like, dreams reflect the person you really are.
Yeah.
And so I have forced my dreams to be less, horrid.
Well, I think
more moral.
I think it's also important that while you're dreaming, you don't always know you're dreaming, right?
Yeah.
So if you're willing to torture or kill, let's say, in a dream, there's a chance you're not dreaming, let's say. And that would be very, very bad.
Yeah.
And so that's another reason to do that.
I'm not saying I was a mass murderer beforehand. I was a kid.
Yeah. But the... those people that kill someone while they're sleepwalking. That could be a related phenomenon where, there's no consequences. Or I've had plenty of dreams where it's like, you get superpowers if you push this person off a cliff, let's say.
Yeah.
And it's tempting. It's like, okay, I know this is a dream, and I'll get the superpower. Like Evil Corp, they have a timeshare with the government on my dreams. It's like, I want these superpowers. That'd be very cool. Like, even if I know it's a dream, it's like, just for an hour, just flying or something, that'd be really fun. But I'm like, what if a thought enters your head while you're awake, right?
Yeah.
And you're just like, and you're awake, but it's the same sort of thought where you sort of daydream, where it's just like, maybe I will get the superpowers. You just start thinking in those terms of...
And then Ruin says, no, the funny thing is, you were never insane to begin with.
Yeah, there is Evil Corp in my brain. So yeah, all these people dying randomly. I don't remember how that tied to dreams.
I think you're just saying dreams being straight up like
statistics. Yeah, statistics and whatnot, yeah. Anyways, so people dying randomly. And it made me think... so the Victorian era, they're very obsessed with death to an extent because they were freaked out. They're like, people are just dying. Everyone's dying.
There's a bunch of death cults.
Yeah, it's like, what do we do? So they became very fatalist to an extent.
Yeah.
Is this true, or am I making this up? But children wouldn't necessarily get named until they were 5 or something?
In some cases, that is true. Or
I know there was the trouser ceremony where you would just kind of... You had one set of clothes for all your children until they got to 5, and then...
Well, there was another thing...
You give them actual pants. So you just had little dresses and skirts for your kids. And then...
So you have a very young kid.
Yeah.
And you have their eldest brother, and so all of them look up to the eldest brother. Then the eldest brother dies. And so next in line, you just give him the elder brother's name. So the younger kids...
Right.
Won't get messed up by their eldest brother dying, and then he's just sort of struck from the record of their memory and existence.
Jeez. I remember, this wasn't Victorian times, this was modern. This was in the 50s, but...
No, more people died in Victorian ages than the time before it.
Yeah.
Especially in cities.
Yeah, it was really bad. With the gas and the arsenic.
And excluding war, because a lot of people died in war.
Bad air, and...
the start of the factories, people getting caught inside the machinery, the mines... Having to go into coal mines.
There's also the start, I don't know, this probably didn't impact much because it's pretty minor in the grand scheme of things, but murder became fashionable to an extent. It still is to this day. But
the duels.
But I'm talking straight up serial killers became popular for the first time, basically.
High populations of people, yeah.
But people loved reading stories about... So murder became sort of romanticized, which it still is today. We had to do a project in my law class about serial killers. And they're treated almost like superheroes or supervillains. This is this guy's methods. This is this guy's methods. And they're also given almost supernatural properties of, if a serial killer comes for you, you're dead. It's well, no, it's an even fight. It's always an even fight. Yeah. The serial killer's tossing a coin every time he does it. Now the smart ones, like the Green River Killer, he killed weak younger women from behind.
Or there's that landlady who basically would get mentally challenged people in her house, then poison them because she was feeding them, and then she'd steal their money after they've poisoned them.
Roald Dahl wrote a short story like that. I wonder.
It might.
I wonder which ones.
No, this was later than that.
I'm just wondering, if reality gets mixed up with fiction. For example,
no, this is reality.
H.H. Holmes.
Yeah.
Apparently, the whole thing was basically made up about him.
Really?
He was a con artist who did kill people.
Yeah. And
he had a very weird house.
Yeah.
And those facts about him got very like he wasn't a serial killer. He killed people when it was convenient to him or when something went wrong. So he did a con with a guy. Yeah. Then he killed the guy so he wouldn't have to split the money. Or he needed a body for a different con. So he just went out and murdered someone and brought the body in. So they think he killed between 3 and 5 people. Not like hundreds.
Yeah.
And the main reason for this discrepancy was the expo did happen in his town.
Yeah. And people stayed at his hotel?
Well, no, because the hotel, I believe it was still a hotel, but it wasn't used during that time. And the killings didn't happen during the time of the expo. They were 2 different times.
Oh.
And the people that died, if they were brought into the house at all, it was because he just didn't know where to put them, basically. So his house was very weirdly designed. It had, it's basically a hoarder's house, let's say.
Yeah.
But possibly purposeful, just so if tax collector came by, he couldn't necessarily figure out where your stuff was, what you owned, that sort of thing. And the newspaper just kind of took these baseline facts and they made their clickbait articles about
about his horror house, because I've seen diagrams, which are apparently fake now.
Yeah, no, that was the newspaper.
That his house did, like the gas chambers, then they bring them down to the floor, and he had the furnaces. And
yeah, so I think his house did have weird features to it, and I think he was burying people in the basement, possibly. It was something, I can't remember the full details. On one hand, it's like, I hate it when people take the romanticism out of something. Yeah. On the other hand, I'm very
glad that he didn't have a murder factory.
Yeah. So I'm torn. I'm torn on that. I mean, so when we were playing Smash Bros, we thought Nana footstooled me and killed me that one time. And so we saved the recording, looked back, and she didn't. Yeah. And it's like, oh, that's a shame. If we hadn't saved the recording, we would have this great story.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, if we had saved the recording and she had done it, it's that much better, right?
Yeah.
So I do think there is... if you want the cool exists, you don't have to make it up. Yeah. Right? So it's probably better to know to an extent, even if it is. And when it comes to a serial killer killing people, that's what happened with the Victorian era and onwards.
Yeah, well, especially Jack the Ripper is one.
Yeah.
The most famous, I think.
Yeah. He became maybe the Zodiac Killer or something, but Jack the Ripper, probably even more Jack the Ripper.
The Zodiac Killer was basically copying Jack the Ripper in his writings.
Like, I guess taunting people and going...
Yeah, like that was Jack the Ripper's thing. Like, there's no original ideas. Yeah.
You wonder, like, I don't know, let's say werewolves. Like, I wonder if ancient times it was the same thing. Yeah. Like, just... I'm sure serial killers aren't new.
No.
But it's hard if you're not in this. If you're in a tribe, 2 people die, you're the chieftain, you're like, all right, it's one of you 3. And where were you yesterday? It's like, well, I was here. Okay. But, okay, you're dead. Like, it would have been fairly simple to solve. Mm-hmm. Not necessarily guaranteed, but it would have been much simpler.
Well, the game of werewolf is quite playable of figuring out who the werewolf is.
But once your city is... excuse me. Once your city is big enough...
Yeah.
Then you can disappear. Because you become a person that nobody knows.
Yeah.
Because you can walk in the street and nobody knows.
But even then, though, I mean, the modern state is now, you can't. And one of the things why the Zodiac Killer is so famous is he wasn't caught.
Yeah.
And why he wasn't caught is because the guy basically lived out of his car and drove from state to state, always trying to get ahead.
Maybe.
Well, that's the theory.
Because we don't... They think he was... they think they know who he was now, but they're still not sure. This guy named Gary something. There is people that have disappeared. So there's a guy...
Guy in Japan.
Who... Well, actually, have you ever looked at the statistics of people disappearing? Like, Dresden Files talks about this. It's like 150,000 people a year in the States alone. Like, a lot of people go missing and aren't found. And all you have to really do, you don't even have to leave the States, let's say, if you're going by the States. All you do is you move from one state to another and don't tell anyone.
Yeah.
And you can disappear fairly effectively.
Well, I don't know if I want to even tell a story. It's kind of disturbing.
So...
Basically, in Japan there was a murder, and the murderer walked out of the sea, went to a house, killed people, slept in the house, ate their food, left. It's never been found.
Yeah. Well, that sort of thing...
he walked out of the sea. It's like, what?
That sort of thing can happen because it's... Forensics is actually a very difficult field. Mm-hmm. It's actually... The most remarkable thing about police, actually, is...
Did they catch anyone else?
How effective they are. Like, they are actually amazingly effective.
What I was saying in the case with Japan is, of murders...
Yeah.
99% of murderers are caught in Japan. Like, you don't actually get away with crimes.
So, you know the story, I think Bob Gimlin actually talked about him. That guy that would put the bag on his head, strip naked and kill people.
Yeah. And then he encountered that police officer.
Well, what I love about that story is it's twofold. Like, I hate the fact that this man exists.
Yeah.
Of course. But first of all, he is actually like slightly supernatural in the fact that he appeared to be actually quite a strong, capable fighter.
Yeah.
Like
he was a big man.
He took down a police officer. And then the other police officer
turned out to be a world champion or
just
something.
took a stab to his arm and then beat this guy to pulp, basically. Yeah. And that's what I love about that story is it reminds you, like, don't love these people. Don't romanticize them. They are humans that are just getting lucky, and they're cowards. It's very easy to be a coward.
The Scream movie, the Scream guy gets beaten up a lot in the Scream movie. And if only they stuck around and kept beating him when they got the upper hand.
Well, it's a parody movie, so...
Yeah.
So, actually, this is a thing about history that I think gets sort of tossed aside slightly, which is good and bad in several ways. Boring cowards tend to be far more effective than, I don't know, berserkers, let's say.
Yeah.
So, you get, like, the Green River Killer. He's possibly killed more than any other serial killer. And, killed more adults than any other serial killer. Like, obviously, the Angels of Death types killed way more. But, and he just picked his targets very carefully, and then he stopped.
Yeah.
And that's all he had to do, basically. Whereas someone like, where am I going with this? So, you have that idea. Yeah. Then you have this guy that he strips naked, goes into people's house, the police get on the scene, take him down.
Yeah.
So you look at the Red Baron, and he's the greatest fighter ace ever.
Yeah.
Now, there's people that have higher scores than him, if you call it scores, but he was, I think, given the time period he was fighting in, how many times he went out, I think he's unquestionably the best.
Yeah.
And how he succeeded was he was incredibly boring.
Yeah.
Like, he said, never leave home territory. If you have a tail, leave the fight. Come back another day. Like, never overextend. If they go anywhere near their airbase, just leave.
Yeah.
He was incredibly boring. And the only reason he was ever taken down was because his brother got shot.
And he lost his
lost his cool, basically. Yeah. And they're not entirely... he had an injury from a previous crash.
Yeah.
And the wind was working weird against him.
The brain is the thought.
Well, or his brain got messed up or something. Yeah. So the reason he was killed was he lost his cool, basically. Yeah. And also, everything worked against him. Like, the clouds and the wind were all weird. And they're not entirely sure why he died.
The gunner was actually really good. The guy in the AA gun was a very good AA gun user.
Well, I think what's remarkable is the fact that they don't know why the Baron was taken down, in a sense. Like,
well, he landed his plane,
but he
died.
I mean, the fact is that he was so good that there's been a question of, like, how did this guy lose? Yeah. Because his plan was basically foolproof. It was, if you have a 100% chance of success, take it, otherwise leave.
Yeah.
That was basically what he did. And it was very, very effective. And that's how you're basically successful in everything. Defensive chess players tend to be the best. Although Bobby Fischer, I believe, was actually aggressive.
Yeah.
And he was sort of the greatest. And his score was all over the place because he never played anyone else. But he would always win. So
yeah, well,
I think Magnus Carlsen is the best ever. And he is defensive, I believe.
Yeah.
And
well, so with the kendo fighters, most kendo fighters, the best ones, are defensive. Most.
Yeah, and I don't know if Kenshi is accurate, but the way they describe the fighting with the Kensho, the Kendo style fighting, the way they describe it is you basically participate in the ritual until someone messes up, and
a little bit, yeah.
Which is kind of how boxing goes as well.
Yeah.
You dodge and you take hits until you have an opening, and then you win.
Yeah, well, some of the best ever kendo fighters, though, are aggressive. Actually, the best guy ever in a tournament, he has a bit of an unfair advantage. He's one of those genetic strangeties, which is, so he's sparring with his opponent, and then the fight's over, and people are like, what happened? And one of the quick-eyed judges, he won. He scored how many points? And so they had to go back to a replay and play it in slow motion. And so this guy kind of ruins the sport of he can strike faster than a human can see, and strikes are equal to points. And he hits someone so many times that they just, like, he overwhelmingly won. Even though they hit him 3 times, he just went, screw this, like, sparring, tinkling about.
Oh, so he hits you faster than you hit him.
Yes.
Right.
Well, these were the best 2 in the world. Everyone else, when they go up against him, they just lose, and he doesn't go nearly that fast.
But all he had to do was knock you out before you knock him out, essentially.
Yeah.
Like, he gets 12 taps before you get 4 type of thing, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Which, yeah, that sounds like a rule change.
Well, no, because you can usually block. They only get 1 hit, and then you would separate from each other.
Right.
Like, he is just like...
Right, but that sounds like the kind of situation where you'd want to implement a rule change.
Yeah.
Like fencing has had a lot over the years.
Yeah. Well, there's no one like this guy in the past, and no one in the future so far has been like him.
Right, but there was that...
the javelin throw.
I was thinking of the football player who nearly killed someone, and they had to change the rules because no one could do what he did. Well, and then he came onto the field and just whacked a guy from behind so hard the guy nearly died.
Do you know about the world record javelin throw?
Oh, was it to do with wind or something?
It's unbeatable.
The moon pass over at the right time? And
no. So, a bunch of people that year threw really far, and this one guy just lobbed the thing. It's amazing. He threw farther than the stadium allowed. And so, modern javelins are heavier than the ones in the past.
Oh.
Because people could throw them too far, and they're throwing them larger than the stadium and measurement allows in the official spacing.
Right.
And so it's going to get into a problem of you need specially built stadiums just for javelin throwers. So instead they change the weight of javelins. And so no one can ever throw until we get absolute, like, unit. No one can throw javelins again as far as this one guy.
Do they have an adjusted score then somewhere?
They do.
I wonder how you compare to him. Because
it's hard because weight changes along with the javelin.
I guess what you could do is, if you think, like, I'm a contender, you just go out in a field with some buddies and you grab a light javelin and see how you can do.
Well, the thing also with javelin records is, like, with the law of records, this is like a 1 in a million. They throw it and it's amazing.
Now, what I kind of hate that idea, actually, going out in a field with a javelin. Like, you ever...
shooting the guns in the air and then the bolts come down?
So... my best friend for his woodworking class, when we were in grade 10 or so, built a target.
Yeah.
And so we thought we'd try it out. So we went out behind his house and we set it up and we shot it with our bow and arrows.
Yeah.
And with our bows and arrows, I guess. And the arrow shattered because he used hardwood for the target.
Yeah.
So we didn't think that part through.
No.
Although even softwood, you shouldn't really shoot with most, like, carbon fiber arrows. So that's not a great idea.
Well, there's never wooden targets.
Yeah.
That's for darts and throwing knives.
I wouldn't even try throwing knives. Like, I've had throwing knives bounce off archery targets.
Yeah.
Throwing knives don't penetrate very well. So I wouldn't want... Like, if you had a really soft wood, maybe. Yeah. Like, axes is what you use wood for.
Yeah.
Like, throwing axes.
Even axes bounce.
So we thought, okay, yeah, but that's your fault more with the axes. Probably with the throwing knives to an extent. Yeah. Anyways, so we shot this thing with bow and arrow, and... arrows shattered. We're like, okay, this isn't... We broke a few arrows trying to pull them out because they stuck in and then we couldn't... The head fell off. So, okay, we'll get the 22 out. So we got out his 22 and we just took turns shooting at the target until the target broke, basically. Yeah. And now his property's large. Right? Yeah. We were shooting into a forest where they owned it for basically the range of the 22.
Yeah.
Now 22 can shoot further than the length of his property. But there's so many trees in the way, you're essentially shooting at a solid wall.
Yeah.
But we didn't have a backstop. And what if his parents had decided to just go out in the woods without telling us?
Yeah.
Or his dog was out in... I was thinking about this not even that long later. I mean, that was grade 10. I mean, it's not like we were tiny children. And I was thinking that was kind of... I don't know. Even when we do archery here.
Yeah.
We have targets set up. We might even have a backstop. Not often, though. But it's like, okay, we got this massive property, much bigger than his. And... no one else is on it, but even if no one else is on it, your family members could still be walking in the woods, taking an unusual path. Maybe there's a trespasser on your property. Yeah. And
the trespassers beware. You're trespassing, although they could be lost because it's such a big property, you could accidentally stumble onto it.
Yeah, well, there's that, and there's also, you're still responsible for the safety of lawbreakers on your land for some reason. So I've never been... I think that law is in place just so you don't build traps around your place, essentially. But I still think you should be allowed to build traps, really. I mean, come on. If someone wants to break into... But I think you should have to post if you put traps, perhaps.
Yeah, so that firemen decide not to rescue you.
Oh, yeah, there's that. But also, like, I was thinking... sometimes you're just... Like, I got really lost once, and so I just had to cut across someone's field. I like hopped over their fence and cut across the field, hopped over another fence. It was quite a tall fence, actually damaged my ankle for weeks. But if they had put, like, landmines everywhere, that could have been quite bad.
Yeah. I mean, isn't a savage guard dog basically a landmine?
So, I didn't see anyone around.
Yeah.
But, so throwing a javelin in the middle of nowhere. So, yeah, people dying everywhere. Got me thinking. The Victorian area, they didn't know what was going on. Also, cholera was huge, because they were in London. They were, their sewer system had broken and was leaking into the Thames.
Yes, because they were using the ancient Roman sewers, and they never thought to repair it or change it.
And
because the sewers had just worked.
Yeah, and they did work until they broke.
Yeah.
But the problem was that they noticed this. They noticed the leakage. They didn't know where it was, so they couldn't fix it. But they noticed that the river was smelling bad.
Yeah.
But at the time, there was miasma theory. So the idea was bad smells were the thing hurting you.
Yeah.
And interestingly enough, so they tried dumping like
flowers.
It was like hydrochloride and lime or something into the river. So they made the river toxic, basically.
Yeah.
And they would soak their curtains in like
lime
and hang them up so the smell would block the river and whatnot.
Yeah.
Didn't really help. And so germ theory came around and fixed the problem, basically. But miasma theory was so thoroughly discredited around that time that modern day, with the pandemic, with coronavirus, it behaves more like a miasma, it seems like. And people were adamantly against that. Like, not researchers necessarily, but scientists were adamantly against it because there was so much stigma against miasma theory.
Yeah, well...
It's not that there's bad air making you feel bad. It's the fact that coronavirus seems to be able to aerosolize.
Yeah, well, the Black Death, the special combo of Black Death, was actually in miasma. Like, there's a reason why they had miasma theory. It's because you walked into a town, you didn't touch a single corpse, you didn't go near the water, you just tried to get through the town. The ticks didn't bite your ankles, and then you dropped dead.
Yeah. So, it's kind of a funny, like, vestige of that. So germ theory came along, solved a whole bunch of medical problems we've been having for centuries. It's like, oh wow, suddenly everything makes sense. It all fell into place. Yeah. Like, we had these things that worked, but sometimes they didn't, and it was... But then germ theory came in, it's like, that kind of solves everything. If germ theory goes out the window tomorrow, maybe it will. Well, maybe that'll solve cancer or something. Which was... Orson Scott Card wrote a book about this, actually. A short story. You read that one, right? Where they discovered that all diseases are caused by germs, including old age, cancer...
intelligence is a disease.
Yeah, intelligence. But they discover it's all germs. And so they create a cure that kills all germs and it ruins people's intelligence.
Yeah.
So it had me thinking about that. And I was watching Bob Gimlin, the YouTube channel about Bigfoot, not the guy that recorded Bigfoot.
Yeah. He named himself that after them.
He did?
Yes.
Okay, so it's not just a really weird coincidence?
No.
Okay.
No, that's not his actual name. He's named after...
Okay.
Patterson's the famous one. Bob Gimblin's the guy still alive. And so he named himself after the guy who's still alive.
But he changed the name from an I to a Y at least,
yeah.
So there's that. Right, so I was watching the modern Bob Gimlin, the younger one, Bob Gimlin Jr., and he was talking about infrasound.
Yeah.
And that got me thinking about this nightmarish dream I had.
Yeah.
See, everything's linked. And the fact that you can have... So I've had very, very terrifying dreams, far more terrifying than those, where I was... I just felt fear. Like, the dream wasn't even that scary. I was walking on... It felt incredibly... Like, more real than real, I think, was a term I heard for psychedelics. But it was kind of like that for a dream. I was walking down the incredibly long hallway of our dad's place. It's a weirdly designed house. Yeah. Because it was two houses that got combined, and their long hallways got combined. So there's a 70-foot hallway, essentially. Well, it's a 50-foot hallway in the house, which is really weird. It's like this narrow corridor. So I was walking down that, which is already horror movie-like. And
there's a reason why I'd run up and down that hallway. Because
it's dark. And then... The bathroom curtain was fluttering out into the hallway, lit by this sort of...
I remember this night.
Brownish light. You remember the fluttering curtain?
No, I remember you waking up from this and being terrified.
Yeah, I think I asked you to get me some water or something. Like I said, like, I don't want to leave our room. Like, can you get me some water? Like, I was so freaked out.
Yeah.
So this thing was...
Yeah, you said there's, like, the essence of fear was in the bathtub. And then you told me to go into that bathroom. And
Well, I knew it wasn't real. It was my dream. I just couldn't combine that with myself, right?
And so you sent me as bait to make sure.
Well, no, I didn't leave the bed for 5 hours after that.
Yeah.
Like, I was in a state of basically max terror for about 5 hours.
Yeah.
Well, max terror for a very brief time in the dream, and then coming down for 5 hours. And so, yeah, this thing was fluttering around, and I went into the bathroom for some reason. I think you run the other way.
In my dreams, I usually attack the thing.
Well, that's what I ended up doing. There was a guy hiding in the bathtub, like you said, who was the source of this fear, and... he was about to cast some sort of spell or something, so I lunged at him or something like that, and he vanished. Horrible feeling of fear.
Yeah.
Absolutely horrible. I've never felt anything like it in my waking life and dreaming since, or before. Absolutely horrible. And I've had some freaky dreams. Most of my dreams are about me being watched, I realized, actually, recently. Like I was talking about the parent at my door. Most of my nightmares involve, like, the Lich from Here's My Magic 2 floating outside the window, or our toy Tyrannosaurus Rex, like, outside the window of the house over there, or like stuff like poisonous gas coming in through the windows, and I keep closing all the windows in the house, and then you come around and you open them all because you want some fresh air. And or like me locking the doors to the house,
and then you see I'm eating a very large garlic sandwich, and the gas is actually being emanating from me all along.
Or me locking the doors to the house as like zombies are coming, and someone's like, "Oh, I forgot my dog outside. Oh, I forgot my mail. Oh, I need to check the mail. Oh, let me walk the dog." That sort of thing. I've had not even dreams exactly. Like, I think I was sleepwalking. I'm not sure. Because I was in bed, and I opened my eyes, and I was in the bathroom. And I opened my eyes, and I was back in my bed. So I think I might have sleepwalked. I'm not sure. Because I used to sleepwalk when I was younger. Not very often. Very rare. You sleptwalk more, I think.
At least you didn't sleepwalk to somehow manage to get your way into the kitchen, eat cookies, then make your way back in bed with the cookie crumbs still on you.
That doesn't seem like sleepwalking.
Yes, but someone... in the room down there.
No, she wasn't sleepwalking.
She claimed
she was just getting cookies and chocolate and whatever else. Right, so I looked into the mirror, and it wasn't my reflection in the mirror. It was a demon, like this horrifying black demon with glowing red eyes. I used to draw it a lot. You know, the classic, like, you do the two angry eyes and the little squiggly mouth? That was what I saw, basically. This was when I was very young. So I've had a lot of scary dreams, but this was scarier than anything in real life, anything in dreams. Not that I've lived through too many real-life scary experiences, I think. It's hard to say. Like, I almost felt... like, well, a cliff collapsed while I was climbing it, but you're not really scared in those moments.
That's panic.
Yeah. like, fear is more you're walking home through the dark type thing, hearing coyotes howl.
Yeah.
Or that's dread. That's what I call dread. So...
freaky little bastards.
I was thinking about this, and about how there appears to be this vague understanding that there are animals that can create infrasonic sounds.
Yeah, lions can stun things.
Tigers, lions, elephants, whales, maybe gorillas. And I was thinking, you know, what if, like, well, Bigfoot, let's say, but what if moose or bears could do that?
Or ravens.
And you're just, you're in your house, asleep, and a moose goes by your house and just makes that noise, and your brain translates that to fear while you're sleeping. And then I was thinking, you know, that's kind of unlikely because, well, I don't really see why a moose would do that. Maybe a moose I could see, but as far as I'm aware, there's not too many moose going by. We had one living in our yard one summer, but I think that's been fairly rare here.
Yeah.
So I was thinking, you know, the Victorian era, they had people dying mysteriously because they got green paint on their walls.
Yeah.
We've got a lot of new stuff, like, I was thinking mostly wires in the house, right?
Yeah.
And how electrical waves we know can disrupt brainwaves. Like you can, there's a simulation you can do where you can, so what they do is they put you in a chair.
Yeah.
And they make you watch videos of like little pastoral scenes, and then they'll show like people getting executed. And then it'll show, I think I talked about this in the podcast before, show like someone boating across a pond, and then it'll show someone getting their arm cut off. And it'll show, like, I don't know, like, just a tree, and then it'll show a tiger jumping at you. Yeah. So these juxtaposed freaky images, like incredibly disturbing images, and then just normal everyday imagery. It might be like a building, and then suddenly you see like 2 people getting shot, that sort of thing. And they can measure your heart rate and everything, or you can just experience yourself, and you get freaked out.
Yeah.
And then they stick this hat on your head, basically, with magnets, and they put a very strong magnetic pulse through a certain part of your brain.
Yeah.
And they show you the same stuff, and your heart rate will just remain totally calm. And they use it to simulate psychopathy, as I've coined it.
This is very similar to a legal experiment, which is you put someone in a room that is a pure magnetic field and drive them insane. Or not insane, but it's like basically makes the person incredibly sick. And so the experiments are illegal because of how awful they are.
Oh, illegal.
Yeah.
That makes more sense.
Yeah, no, they're it's like you expose someone to a magnetic field and they basically want to curl up and die.
So very strong electromagnetic radiation can affect you. And in the Victorian era, they had exposed wires in their house.
Yeah.
And it was affecting people.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if it's known to what extent, but there is a theory that ghosts haunting houses are all in houses with stripped wires, because that's where you'd have the stronger electromagnetic field. You know those what are they called? UPSs, universal power things. Yeah. They generate an a very strong electromagnetic field because they're a giant battery. Yeah. So do electric cars and electric tractors. There's actually an electric tractor. It sometimes drives on the road over there, and you can smell because electromagnetic fields generate ozone. And so you can actually smell when the tractor is being driven, even if you haven't seen it or heard it. So it's quite something. But it makes me wonder, maybe it's not electrical forces, maybe it's something else that's common, like the dye and fabrics that we use now, or cleaning products.
Wearing cotton.
Yeah, something like that. What if mental illness is just an environmental injury that we're not aware of? And so, 100 years from now, they talk about the Elizabethan era. It'll still be the Elizabethan era, but long may she reign. But they'll talk about the mid-Elizabethan era.
And the crazy people that wore cotton clothing.
Yeah, the fact that they, like, it's understandable, like, fair enough, you didn't know arsenic was bad. Yeah. But you'll talk about these people that they were so confused because everyone suddenly seemed to have mental illnesses. Everyone was suddenly confused. And maybe it's dietary. I think that would be the much more likely one. Yeah. The diets of the time were just such that everyone got mental illnesses, or their sleep schedules, or their using of screens, let's say computer screens or something.
Or the sheer amount of light they had in their environment.
Yeah, or unnatural schedules like daylight savings. Yeah. I think, light and daylight savings, I think, are two very disruptive.
I think we're in a kind of unique situation where we live with the sun cycle. So something I've observed, and I do this now, is I make it so my curtain is slightly propped open at an angle, because I don't like having a curtain completely up while I sleep. Yeah. But I make sure it's an angle so light can flood my room, and then I situate myself so I turn over my sleep and I cover and I have a huge amount of angles basically protect myself from that light. But then when I finally wake up, and I get up and I turn, I will immediately get hit by the sunlight, and that wakes me up. In the wintertime, when I wake up, I can't do that because the sun's not up. And I'll go, huh? And I'll fall back asleep because it's still dark. But I use the light to wake me up. And I get the same amount of sleep, relatively like winter and summer. But when it's spring and fall, I get far more fulfilling sleep than in summer and winter because of the light.
I think I've possibly done my rant about daylight savings on the channel before.
Have.
But the other thing I notice is temperature. Yeah. Where it seems a lot colder now that we're on permanent daylight savings. Because you wake up and you're like, wow, it's minus 15. It was never minus 15 this time of year before. But if you wait 2 hours, which is our crazy long daylight savings offset, it's only 5 degrees. And you realize those last couple hours of the morning, it warms up like crazy. And then it remains stable around minus 5 for the rest of the day. Yeah. And then it gets colder at night. But it's really hot when you go to bed because you're going to bed before everything's cooled off because you've offset it, which means it seems to me like the whole daylight savings was to save energy because you don't use as much light because it's lighter in the morning or lighter in the afternoon, darker in the morning when you don't need the light. But you must be using way more heating, right? Yeah. Because you wake up and you're like, it's minus 15, start a fire, turn on the electric heat, whatever it might be. So I'm not convinced it even saves energy. I mean, maybe the data shows it does, but it's certainly something. Yeah. So I think there is something wrong that we're not aware of, and this ties into the broader topic I've been thinking of like scientific worship, but also so with mental illness.
There's some mental illnesses I want to.
Yeah. So we can talk a bit more about mental illness then.
Yeah.
But so just as a preface then. One thing, so I don't know if you know this about. So this is what I'm getting at with the infrasound as well. Yeah. So this is a very important part I missed. So it's good we continued. When you are affected by something, you feel a very strong reaction, and then after that point, you determine what your reaction is.
Yeah.
So, for example, if you're hit with infrasound, people say they feel uneasy, they feel fear, they feel nausea, they feel confusion.
Yeah.
But what they're doing is they are post hoc declaring the emotion of the disruption of their nervous system. Yeah. So their nervous system was essentially scrambled, and then they determine what that feeling was after. So an example of this my psychology teacher used to use was he had a friend who knew a back road nobody else went on, like the back of his hand. It was like this windy mountain road. And so he'd take his dates out there, and then he'd just start exhilarating as he went down this windy mountain road.
Yeah.
And then he'd flip the lights off on his car. It was night. He'd flip the lights off on his car. So it's dark and they're flying way too fast for that road through the darkness. And he's just taking all these turns. He knows this place like the back of his hand. He could drive it with blindfolded, which he practically is. Yeah. And then he'd get to the lookout. And then he'd turn on the lights of the car. And then he'd lean over and kiss the girl that he was riding with. And so their mind would be still processing, like, I am feeling a massive amount of something, like a massive amount of affect. And then he'd lean over and kiss him, like, my heart's racing. This guy, he leaned over, he kissed me. I must be in love. And so it was...
Freaking psychologist.
I don't even know if he was a psychologist, but
his friend was a sociologist or psychologist.
Yeah.
You can suspect.
So he might have known something about it, but... The that's a horrible thing to do. I don't.
That's basically roofing someone.
No, you're putting your lives at risk.
Yeah.
And then you're giving them a false impression of yourself. I don't know what you call that. That's not.
Well, you're drugging them in a way.
Yeah, but
with their own system. Yeah,
it's messed up. It's interesting how psychologists seem to be. I don't know. The psychology teacher I had for a lot of classes, so it's hard to determine what they're all like. Because I've only had 2 psychology teachers in total, even though I've taken 3.5 years of courses. Well, 3 years of courses, I guess. 2.5, but I took extra in the earlier years. So, anyways, but then seeing Jordan Peterson, it seems very similar, where they seem a step removed from being a shaman.
Yeah.
Like, my psychology teacher was actually offered to be a shaman of a tribe.
Sorry. See, when I was thinking about the psychology teachers I've had, I was like, they're not really... I can't think of any relation between the two. And then you said they're a step removed from being a shaman. And then I was like, he could totally be a shaman. He'd be a very weird shaman. Could be a shaman. The other guy's like a shaman in training. And that psychology teacher was a psychologist in training. He wasn't actually a psychologist at the time.
So, my psychologist teacher was actually offered to be a shaman for a First Nation tribe, which Jordan Peterson was also offered to take the training for.
Yeah.
So it's very interesting that now the other possibility is that Jordan Peterson is Gilderoy Lockhart, and he's just stolen my psychology teacher's story, and he takes like all the stories and he makes himself the hero that has done everything. But you know how hurtful that would be actually for people that liked Gilderoy. Like, he is a hero. He's this handsome, charismatic, charming guy who invents spells on the fly, has done more good for people than like 10 Aurors combined.
Yeah.
And you look up to him, and then it turns out he's a fraud, and that would just be devastating.
Mm-hmm. Well, so that's the thing I think a bit with Elon, where people call him a fraud, like these companies are fraudulent he's doing. It's like, well, if he's a scam artist or a fraud, he's the greatest one in history. Because he's the richest man on Earth.
Yeah.
By the measurable money of people we know as riches. And so if he's a scam artist, that is one crazy scam he's pulled.
Well, I mean, Augustus Caesar kind of duped Rome.
Yeah, I know, but exactly. It's like one crazy...
And then, of course, there's Comte de Saint Germain, who it's debated whether he was a scam artist to this day. So, I mean, is he the greatest? Because he was never caught.
Yeah, or John Dee was...
He wasn't a scam artist.
he was a charlatan.
No, he wasn't. He was legit. Like, he advanced mathematics and astrology. And
So did he actually speak with the angels then?
well, he founded...
and predict the future accurately?
like, he single-handedly attempted to build the Library of England.
Yeah.
And, like, he bought thousands of books out of his own money. And he was a great mathematician. And he was a great astrologer and scientist.
But, like, the aspect I'm saying where he's a charlatan is his book, not the one that you gave me, but the book the angel gave him, which let him speak to the dead. So he spoke to the dead and he predicted the future for the queen. So he'd actually tell her what was going to happen in the future. And he was right. Here's a reason why he held his job, because the queen that he was serving, she was kind of famous for being aggressive.
Yeah. Well, she eventually they had a falling out, and John Dee actually died in poverty, which is quite sad because he had to sell all his books. So he single-handedly tried to build this library, and then it all got scattered, which is quite unfortunate because he had some really interesting books, like the Voynich manuscript. Yeah. And he had another book that was. It had this. This is the book I told you about where it said if you read it you'll die. So the reason that is known about it is John Dee had this book. Yeah. And he knew the entire book except for the last 2 to 4 pages, I think it was, which are this weird grid of letters. Yeah. And it's actually been cracked with AI cracked it in 2015 or something. Huh. But it took like a lot of
dead people.
Well, the AI basically just tried everything it could. It just kind of like went.
I mean, inputting into the AI and
yeah, well, the AI died 2 years later. No, the researcher who cracked it in the end, he's still alive. So maybe. But what happened was John Dee wanted to crack it, so he summoned an archangel to help him. So he summoned the archangel Uriel, who's the one from the Dresden Files. No, that's Ursiel. Yeah, he summoned Uriel. Anyways, summoned Uriel, and Uriel said, "This is written in a divine language that only the archangel Michael can decipher." Yeah, which it's just kind of like, could you have sent Michael? No, why did you come? I summoned someone to help me with this, and you're telling me, nah, sorry, only Michael's got that one. But he also said, anyone who reads it, can decipher it and reads it will die 2.5 years later.
Also, when you said John Dee died in poverty, he might not have.
Well, I mean, what, like he got the Philosopher's Stone and got out of there? Or...
Well, he's on the same lines of Nicholas Flamel.
And the dude who we went near, Edward... Yeah. No, not Edward Kelly. Was it Edward Kelly?
Well, we were near... Nicholas Flamel and the other guy lived in Prague.
No, it was... I got it wrong. It was John Dee and Edward whatever both lived in Prague. Ah. So they... John Dee fled to Prague after the Queen. Ah. Well, he didn't flee. He needed work, so he went to Prague. And he and this other guy lived together. Yeah. Where across the street from that hotel we stayed in. Yeah. And... Because Nicholas Flamel was French.
Yeah, but they deciphered the secrets in Nicholas Flamel, and... Their deaths are very similar to Nicholas Flamel and his wife's death.
So they all went into the governmental alternate dimension.
Do you know about Nicholas Flamel's death and why he's called the Immortal? Who with the Philosopher's Stone? Do you know?
Him and his wife are buried together.
Well, so he was very old. Yeah. But he looked very young. Same with his wife. So when they died, they were buried. Yeah. And then people were like, well, this guy is a famous alchemist. We're going to look for his treasure inside his coffin. So they cracked open his coffin, and he wasn't there. The gravekeeper said, oh, this happens sometimes. People won't be in their coffins because we mess it up and we bury them somewhere else. And so they went through the registry of the graveyard, and they figured out where he was actually buried. And so they went and opened that up. And he also wasn't there. And then they're like, okay, this is kind of weird because they figured he'd be buried with all his stuff. So when he died, he left no will, which is also very odd, and he and his wife didn't have any children. And they died basically at the same time, the two of them. And so people went to his house to go see, maybe he left his stuff in his house or his boys there. They went into his house, and everything was gone. All of his gear, all his alchemy stuff, all his money, all the pictures, all the books, the house was empty shell. And so
there's also...
he just vanished.
I'm sure there was gravekeepers selling bodies before they buried them.
Yes.
Like a university would just pop by and they'd be like...
Oh, that's quite common.
Yeah. And then someone robs his house or something. Like,
yeah.
It could like, you're a gravekeeper. You see Nicholas Flamel's body. You're like, I bet he's not in the house anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I could get me some stuff.
Yeah.
Probably quite lucrative if you had low morals to be a gravekeeper.
Yeah.
Dangerous if you did have good morals.
Well, that's why... So there's this whole thing about burying people certain deaths, and you had to pay more money to bury them deeper because it's labor. But it made it a lot more annoying to dig them up, so protect them from grave robbery if you're buried deeper.
I don't know if it's... I mean, all this is hard to know if it's true, but the one I love about Nostradamus is he was buried, like, in the wall of some place. I can't remember what it was. Anyways, he was buried. And they had to demolish the place and move his body. So they did, and they found he'd been buried with a medallion.
Yeah.
Like, it'd been under his clothes or something, I don't know. And it had a date on it, it was like 1572. And they're like, wait, that's this year. What?
And also, his fingers had the middle ones extended. And underneath that was a second plaque that said suckers.
Then when they removed his... When they had to move his grave again, the top of his head skull popped open and there was a date and it said 2022. But I kind of wonder with Nostradamus, like, he wrote so much. It's like, you just fling as much stuff as you can into the wind. Stick.
Right.
So, yes. So yeah, with mental illnesses, I actually want to... I want to talk about Carl Rogers, but I'm not sure where to fit it in exactly. Maybe it'll come up. So, I was wondering, though, before you get into your... As the preface, which I still didn't get to,
Okay.
So, you feel something, and then you interpret it as fear, happiness, love, whatever it might be. Now, these are all just theories, of course, which I want to talk about as well. But, like, we don't know for certain how the brain works, obviously. And maybe I'm remembering it wrong even, because that happens, of course. But it makes me wonder. I was reading Ward by Wildbow, who is a brutal author. I don't know if they're man or woman, but they write Worm, right? Yeah. Worm and Ward. And their stuff, like, their books are about mental illness, essentially, and it's just so painful to read. It's like, because it's so bad and horrible. It's not like Kaladin or something where it's just like, oh, this is the worst thing ever, or Thomas Covenant. No, it's painful because it's so realistic.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, here's this family, they love each other, but they clash a bit, and it just makes everything a bit complicated, and you're just like, oh man, just hurts. But he has a couple psychologist characters in his books who, that's where I want to talk about Rogers, because I don't think anyone writes psychologists right. But I do wonder, Wildbow seems to be so knowledgeable, I wonder if I was taught mostly humanism, and other psychologists actually act the way he writes his psychologists. Because humanism is different from the others. Like, it's different from cognitive behavior therapy. And so I do wonder if maybe he knows what he's talking about. Or if he's a therapist, and so he thinks therapy, like I don't know, school counseling's the same as a normal psychologist or something like that. Maybe, I don't know. So he writes these... He talks about how if you feel a really negative emotion, your brain will come up with the emotion will create a thought to justify itself. Yeah. So if you're feeling fear, you will come up with a reason for that fear. You'll say, well, it's because I've got this test coming up. Or, oh, it's because that stupid person keeps cutting me off in traffic and I think they're out to kill me or something. Or it's because of those tigers in the woods. So you're creating a reason for your problem, essentially, instead of just disregarding the problem outright. And I was thinking, in order to do that, you're essentially taking an instinct, like a very good instinct, like fear, something's wrong, something's disruptive, look around, be careful. And you're adding to that, like, this is this person's fault, this is my fault, this is because I didn't try hard enough, this is because I wasn't loved as a kid, something like that. You're putting that on top of it, right? So it made me think, is mental illness the awareness of natural instinct? And through the awareness of the instinct itself, you're corrupting that instinct into something which it was not intended to be. So essentially, mental illness is you feel something bad because of the Bigfoots in your walls sending out electromagnetic radiation. So then your instinctual being is run, essentially. But that doesn't make sense to you because there's no sight. So you say, oh, it's because I'm bullied at school. That's why I feel so bad. And so that's why I have depression, because I'm bullied at school. But it's actually the Bigfoots in your wall.
Well, we've had bed lamps for a while.
And then, so what I'm saying is mental illness is consciousness acting on instinct.
Well,
So, in that sense, mental illness could be a proof of consciousness.
I can't remember who it is, and it's a very common line, but whoever coined it, the human mind is its greatest weapon and its greatest enemy, or something like its greatest strength and it's also the greatest weakness, is we destroy ourselves with our own mind. Like, you can drive yourself insane.
Yeah, but I wonder if it's more than that. I wonder if all mental illness, let's say, is the result of consciousness. And I'm not saying consciousness as in thinking. I'm saying like the actual mystical phenomenon that humans are so obsessed with of why do we seem to be able to think about thinking, right? That aspect of we appear to be gods in the bodies of mortals. What is that? Is the proof of that godhood mental illness? Because a god is given an imperfect body and says, well, there must be a rational explanation for this. When it's your body's telling you, run. And you're like, well, there's obviously nothing to run from. Therefore, it must be because of it. And that causes mental illness.
So, Chunubyu, we've talked about this before, I think. In the anime with the Psyche?
Yeah.
And the Chibi, little guy with white hair?
Mm-hmm.
So, that's a common condition.
The thing where kids think they're...
Yeah, 8th grade syndrome.
Right, where they want to be special. And
yes.
so they invent a secret superpower for themselves that they can't reveal to the world.
So there's 3 actually categories at Chunubyu, which is, so the most common one, the most popular is evil eye.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's represented by like the wrapping the bandages around the arms to keep the demon arm, or having an eye patch to contain demon eye, you have hand power. Another one is...
secret agent, maybe?
No, that would be under evil eye. So another one is no one understands you.
Yep.
So you are unique. No one understands you. You are far more intelligent than everyone else. You're very special. And the third one is what is it? So there's unique. No one can relate to you. You have a superpower. Damn, I can't remember the third one.
Classic.
Well, it was in my mind until I was about to say it, and then it vanished.
Yep.
But so there's 3 of them. And so when I was reading about this, because it's very common in... that's it. Anti-culture. So it's... it's very similar to a Western condition. But the anti-culture...
Feminism.
Well, we'll get to that. You're jumping the gun here.
Marxism.
So you are do everything against culture.
Right.
So
you're defined by culture as its antonym.
Yeah, so you're unique.
Like that fat woman with the weird earring I talked about.
So most people grow out of 8th grade syndrome.
Just thinking, like, we have, 70 episodes, maybe, of...
bullying this poor...
Let's say lore we're building on top of. So if I just say, like, the fat woman...
Yeah.
That sounds so bad out of context.
So, but your uniqueness. But most people grow out of 8th grade syndrome, although some people say it's hard for others. But usually, after you're done with 8th grade, you go into 9th grade, you usually grow out of it.
Right. This is a Japanese sort of cultural phenomenon, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Caused by shonen manga.
Partly. It's also... So you're growing up and you're confused and you want to... teenagers very much want to feel special. So there's a different thing called personal fable.
Okay.
Have you heard of this?
Yeah, that's young, right?
Might be young stuff, but it's a mental condition that is categorized in the West, and it's mostly experienced by young people.
Yeah.
And so in the West, it is...
I think it's
omniscience, invincibility, unique circumstance. So you think you know more than everyone else.
Right.
You are special. You are unique. Particularly in young men, a feeling of immortality. Pain is something that happens to other people. Injuries happen to other people. Dying happens to other people. I'm indestructible.
Okay. That's weird, because that seems more reasonable than the Japanese ones. And I wonder if that's only cultural.
So the next step, though, which is deeper in personal fable, is you're being watched by an audience.
Right.
So, and people of personal fable will start to narrate to themselves internally, and it can turn to external monologuing.
Right.
as well. So they're talking to the audience, and the audience is applauding and watching along. Like, they don't hear the applause, but they can't match it because they are the main character. They are the center.
Right. So you're not necessarily as crazy as it sounds, I assume. It's more the fact that you think, hey, I'm a hero, and people, or at least the divine is watching and they applaud what I am doing.
Yes.
So you think,
Well,
so it's like a feeling of righteousness all the time, let's say.
yeah. Well, in The Game is Life, how all those people are watching Brandon.
Yeah.
So it's basically you think you're Brandon
Yeah.
from The Game is Life, and everyone's watching you.
Yeah. Or you are the embodiment of justice.
Yeah.
Perhaps.
So,
I'm not saying that definitively. I'm asking because...
yeah, no, that can be one of the things. They are the biome, so that could be it. So, what's interesting with this personal fable is, so girls feel more unique.
Okay.
So
girls aren't like the other girls.
yes, they're not like the other girls, but actually, so they feel more unique.
Yeah.
But boys feel unique more often.
Right. So if a girl gets...
So
worse.
it's quantity over quality.
Right.
So there's less girls that suffer from personal fable, but they suffer from it more acutely
Right.
than men. So this is actually true in 8th grade syndrome as well.
Okay.
So more young boys have it.
But girls do it worse.
Yeah, do it worse. So there's another thing which isn't officially categorized called special snowflake syndrome, which is you think you're a unique special snowflake.
Right.
So the thing is, Chinubian and personal fable are both discouraged massively. So how they are both dealt with, and so in,
Bullying.
well, it's
Bullies win again.
it's not so much bullying. So in Japan, you point out to the person basically that they are not special.
Yeah.
So that's like one of the treatments, and usually people grow out of it from embarrassment because they'll reflect on their life, maybe go away or whatever. So you point out through embarrassment, and like their peers sort of, they do tease them or bully them or whatever, or it's like, oh, use your special snake eye power. It's like, no, I'll destroy the world. It's like, well, that's too bad for you. So personal fable is you basically have a psychologist putting the person into situations, like not the psychologist or the therapist to treat the person,
where they can't justify their position.
yes, you put the main character into situations where they're very unmain character-like. And you also talk to them and like basically point out there's far greater people than you, and like it's very damaging to the ego actually at treating personal fable.
It's destructive of the ego.
Yes.
Literally. Like the ego is your sense of self.
Yes.
So this would destroy it.
Yeah. And why they do that though is because personal fable isn't very dangerous, and Nubian isn't very dangerous for kids.
Yeah.
Because they have self-preservation. That children, people are like, oh, kids have no self-preservation. They actually have a lot. And also, you can't have that much impact on the world as a kid, and you still look up to adults. So adults that have Chinubian, adults that have personal fable, are extreme dangers to themselves. Like, people with personal fable, if they're like a full-blown adult, sometimes have to spend the rest of their life in an asylum so they don't kill themselves. Because they think they're invincible. So they'll walk out into the center of the street and get hit by a car.
Right, like that woman from Mulan, the grandma.
Yeah.
With her lucky cricket.
Mm-hmm.
Did you remember that? Where she closes her eyes and walks across a busy road holding her lucky cricket? And because she thinks that it'll protect her from all harm?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's like that.
So why would that be the case related to... So personal fable is you think you're the main character. But main characters can die, so what's...
Well, personal fable isn't... It's more so than the main character. So the philosophy that I talked about of you're the only person in existence...
Yeah.
And a lot of people will push back against that. Because, like, no, I'm real myself. And it's observation. But, so personal fable is everyone else is an NPC.
Right.
It's not even you're the main character. You're the only character.
Right, so it's slipsism.
Yes.
Right.
It's slipsism of, like, self-destructive nature.
Right. Because you don't think the rules apply to you.
Yeah. But basically you're slapped in the face and say, no, they do apply. However, I wonder...
If you punch enough people in the face...
No, I just wonder if there's one category of this mental thing, Genevianism, personal fable, that we've accidentally missed and are now encouraging.
Which would be...
Well, it could be in some cases transgenderism.
Right. So,
but, I mean, a lot of things, like, just because there's a lot of problems that people have, and they can be encouraged at times.
Right, so you're saying... What are you saying? There are people who have unrealistic expectations about the world in order to feel special.
Yeah. And
that is expressed in many different ways.
And they're coddled for it.
And we can recognize certain ways which is expressed, as in, if someone says, I'm invincible, you can very clearly say, no, you're not. If someone says, I have the power to summon a dragon, you say, show me. And if they can't, then you go, there you go. So you're making, there might be other deep-seated beliefs people have about themselves, which are simply delusions to feel special.
So Etherkin have spectral wings.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so annoying when you touch my Etherkin. But Etherkin isn't going to jump in front of a train because you have your ancestral animal spirit that's possessing your human body.
Or a lot of those Chinese martial art masters that think they can knock people down with from like 10 feet away.
Yeah, that could be. And they're all different kinds of delusion.
I mean, you could see the psychological session in place when that kickboxer fought the Chinese master, where he just punched him in the head a bunch of times, and the guy had like never been hit in his life.
Yeah.
And you know that's like instant deconstruction right there.
Yeah. And that is the main treatment for personal fable, is deconstruction of reality.
You could, of course, build an even more warped version, like, well, you could come up with all sorts of solutions. Yeah. Like,
it's the trials I must face.
Yeah, I let them do it.
Yeah, or it's the trials I must face to attain my true power.
Yeah, or they're an evil force equal and opposite to myself, and they were able to push through my powers.
Yeah.
Or you need to believe in the powers for them to work. And if you don't believe in them, you're evil. Something along those. So you can defend your delusions quite handily.
Yeah. But these all fall under juvenile delusion. So
desire to be special, essentially.
Yes, because you're trying to find yourself when you're a kid. So it's a desire to be special. And they appear in adolescence. And they usually disappear in adolescence.
I wonder what that's called. Is it because it's easier to have an imaginary world than to actually do something special?
Yes.
Like, do you think?
Oh, yeah. Way easier.
Like, if you... I have a friend, he was the youngest person to be a judo master in Canada.
Yeah.
I think it was judo. Might have been jujitsu. Jiu-jitsu, I think, yeah. He was the youngest person to be a jiu-jitsu master in Canada, something like that. Or black belt, or whatever their qualification is. I mean, that's pretty special.
Yeah.
He doesn't need to make up a story, right?
Yeah.
But someone that's... Like, let's take someone like me, right? I've almost done stuff, but I've never really done anything. Like, I've published a book, but I didn't do very well. I've had some jobs, but it didn't go anywhere. Like, so I need a little... I've gotten good grades, but, I never won, like, a Nobel Peace Prize or something.
Yeah.
So maybe I need a little something extra to feel like I stand out, because I don't have a thing I can... I mean, I have a Dumbledore's Army coin, so there's that. Like, how many people have that? So, because I'm a member of Dumbledore's Army. I can't talk about it much, but I do have one of the coins, a galleon with the DA logo on it, and it heats up when I'm called to...
Yeah.
And so I just take the wrapping off my hand so I can use my wand, because I don't want my wand to just light up, because I don't know how to cast... I always forget to turn off Lumos. I always forget the words, so my wand's just always lit. So, I gotta...
Yeah.
Hide my hand. So yeah, so I guess slapping people about...
Well, I'm not saying slapping people about, but I just wonder...
So let's use transgenderism, because you brought it up. So the cure for that might be saying, no, you're not. Is that what you're saying?
It's a very weird situation that we put ourselves into with transgenderism.
Because I don't think that is the case.
Yeah.
I think it's much more akin to any other dysmorphia, like anorexia.
Well, so there's real transgenderism, which is like anorexia.
Maybe.
But there's the whole thing of the trans-trendian with the young girls.
Maybe. The studies I read, I told you about. I don't think I talked about it on the podcast, but the studies I read weren't very convincing.
Yeah. But I just wonder about certain things of that nature. But even then, it's just such an oddity that how we approach certain things and others.
So there are things that you can dismiss because they're clearly crazy.
Yeah, but religion.
And then there's things we have to respect and tolerate.
Yeah, like religion.
Yes.
Like,
why should you tolerate anyone's crazy delusions of the sky man?
yeah.
Yeah.
And
I think the answer to that, why should you, is because you'd be delusional yourself to think you knew everything. Mm-hmm. And maybe the Muslims got it right and it doesn't hurt to treat them well. Because, maybe they'll put in a good word for you when you're burning... No, what's the Muslim hell? You become covered in layers of fat and it's super hot and your layers of skin constantly get burnt off. And there's water, but you can't reach it. It's very interesting if you look at hells. Like the Inuits is like cold. The Muslims is like hot. It's just where you live.
And the Greeks are unique and personalized.
Yeah, they're ironic.
Yes.
And
I don't know what to say about the Greeks, that they're hell's ironic.
That you reap what you sow.
Yeah.
And of course, with Greeks, exceptionalism is also necessary.
Yeah. It's funny.
Because if you're just an ordinary person, you just get stuck in the fields forever.
What's funny, though, about those fields is he has such a negative view about them. Like, especially the Percy Jackson and Olympians. Like, you have to do something special.
But on the other hand, you've given up on all burdens. You're free.
Yeah.
Life was the burden that you got to lose.
Like, the fields aren't actually that bad.
Yeah, at least you're not alive anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Which shows how rough life was back then.
Yeah.
Like, you go to Elysium, and what's the deal with Elysium? You get to be reincarnated? It's like, you have to be a hero to do that. Like, if you get reincarnated 3 times, you get to go to the island.
Yeah.
You get to go to Hawaii or whatever? I don't remember what it's called.
The special island center of Elysium.
Yeah, I think it's Hawaii. If you do the hardest...
So I just had the thought of... So there's not many people on the island, obviously.
Yeah.
Let's say you die, and you wake up, and the Greeks were right about the afterlife.
Yeah.
And your boatman, like, brings you to the island, and you get there, and as you step off on a sword, you see this big old board on the wall. As you're stepping up, there's numbers next to your name, and they're just ticking up. Tick, 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 tick. New high score!
You were reincarnated 5 times. Oh boy, you're a glutton for punishment, aren't you? I wonder what happens if you mess up. Like, do you get to go to Elysium if you mess up the second time round, or
you might end up in the fields, or you might...
Or just sent to Tartarus. It's like all or nothing. You don't even get an ironic punishment. It's just Tartarus.
Well, Tartarus is actually, I think, worse than ironic punishment.
Yeah, it is. It's chaos. It's hell.
No, it's not chaos. It's where the Titans are.
It's the extra hell.
Yeah.
It's the hell inside hell.
Yeah. It's where the Titans have been banished. It's the dark.
Yeah. It's where
the pieces of Kronos are scattered.
That's where Tartarus lives. Yeah.
Yeah.
The primeval force.
Well, if you travel far enough in Tartarus, you encounter chaos.
You ever find that very weird that Hades and Tartarus are both people, but they're also places? Mm-hmm. Like, what?
So is chaos.
So do they name the place after the dude, or are you entering the dude?
I mean,
that kind of defeats my whole Greeks weren't gay argument, doesn't it?
Well, no, they are as much the place as they are themselves.
If you're entering Hades can be gay.
Chaos, the creator of all the Greek gods, is a force, but it is also...
Mist was the...
Well, no, so there's mist, and from mist came chaos, and from chaos came the gods, or the Titans.
That actually ties in very interestingly to what I wanted to talk about, which was white holes.
Ah.
If you're done. Yeah? So
I have some interesting thoughts on those.
Much like chaos, the creation myth and the Big Bang, they're very similar, aren't they? And that is partly purposeful, because the guy that invented the Big Bang theory was a creationist, so that does make sense.
Yeah.
It's kind of weird. Physics for a long time was done to prove and promote God's wonder, essentially. And suddenly something, I don't know what happened, but it flipped for a bit.
Yeah, well,
I'm not even sure if it did. It might have just been anti-religious people said, oh, look at you unreligious people, unscientific people. And they're like, wait, no, we were the scientists. What? No, we're the scientists. Galileo, you were mean to Galileo. So, Galileo was religious.
Yes, he was doing it to try to show the glory of God.
So I think...
And he was so religious, actually, that they put him under house arrest. They didn't kill him.
Yeah, they're like, this is a good guy, he's just a bit misguided.
So they locked him in his 4-story tower that was a palace and brought him food.
Well, yeah, I mean,
he was locked inside, but...
If you've got a respected member of society who just goes crazy, it's like, you gotta look after him.
It's just...
He's a danger to himself.
It's so weird when I think about Galileo's house arrest, because he had his courtyard. His house was really big, and it was 4 stories tall, so he could perform his experiment of dropping objects out of his tower. And he was actually under constant watch by guards to make sure he didn't get out into society. Like, basically said to the guys, well, you guys aren't doing anything, so I'm going to keep dropping these things out of this tower, pick them up and bring them back up to me. And so they're like, okay, Galileo.
So, you ever, like they're a danger to themselves, you gotta lock them up. I mean, you talked about that with people with the 8th grader syndrome.
Yeah.
You ever wonder about that? Like, that's kind of terrifying, isn't it? Like, what if your beliefs, which you think are quite normal and sensible and rational, get you locked up because you're a danger to yourself? That's terrifying.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't like that idea at all.
No.
And all that it takes, it's not even for you to be insane. It's for you to be counter to society.
Yeah.
If your beliefs don't line up with the cultural enforced
poor old what's his name?
Paradigm.
Alan Turing.
Well, he was gay, right?
Yeah, but it went against society.
Yeah.
And so he volunteered for the chemical castration.
Right, yeah.
He volunteered because he was curious as to what to happen, and then made him super depressed, and then he killed himself.
Yeah.
But he wasn't depressed until the castration. Like, castration can make people really depressed.
Yeah, it can make animals depressed.
Yeah.
Makes everyone depressed because you're losing hormones. You're just like, whoa.
Yeah, and so, yeah, he committed suicide because he was super bummed out.
But imagine, like, you start spouting about the merits of individualism in feudal China. And they're like, this dude's crazy. Like, what's going on? It's about the society. Like, he's a good guy, but he's crazy. We gotta lock him up. I don't know what else to do.
Yeah.
Like, or the story that terrifies me, there's a guy, I don't know his real name, I think. Because I'm pretty sure his name wasn't Dusk.
Mm.
But he lived over there. He's a child of a friend of our dad's. And he stopped listening to his parents.
Yeah.
Like, he just stopped. He just kind of became a brick wall.
Yeah.
Whatever they said, he wouldn't listen to a word they said. Similar to you when you were a kid. This is actually very funny. Connor was tested for deafness when he was young because we thought he was deaf, but it turned out he just didn't care.
Better than average hearing, actually.
It turned out he just didn't care what we were saying.
Yeah. No, the test revealed I have very good hearing.
I'm not sure how we got you to do the test, really.
Well, you can always carry a 5-year-old.
Yeah, but they could have been like, raise your hand if you hear this, and you're just like, no.
Well, actually, so there's this guy in England who's gone to prison 5 times. This is disturbing. So, he walks out into the middle of the street and stands in one spot. And he says nothing. And police will come up to him and say move, and he won't respond, and he'll stand there. And they'll try to ask him questions, and he doesn't say anything. And so he has to be removed because he's in the middle of the street. And he goes to court, and they ask him to defend himself, and he says nothing. And he won't say a word until they put him into prison for a sentence of standing in the middle of the street. When he gets out, he walks back to that exact same spot and stands there. And so he's been arrested 5 times for doing this. And he doesn't speak at all. Like, the only times he's been heard to speak is he'll sometimes say thank you to people for giving him stuff, like giving him food or doing something for him. And that's the only words he says. And it's like, why are you standing here? Do you need help? Is there some sort of trouble? And he just stands there and he doesn't say anything.
And yeah, it seems crazy, but like when the meteor hits and wipes out all life on Earth except that one street, it's gonna seem like the guy that you were just talking about. And I mean that sort of literally. Like, I mean, he might be crazy, but if you go against society, you appear creepy and crazy all the same.
Yeah.
And
well, it's like, what if he's under some sort of guise?
Yeah. But it is.
You must watch this spot.
It is disturbing, though, the idea of just... So, yeah, this kid, Dusk, stopped listening to his parents. And he... so they just, like, put him in an insane asylum, essentially. Because they didn't know what to do. And I was thinking, okay, yeah, but what if the parents are the problem? That just seems like such a... I really didn't like that. Like, the way I was told it, it was like, oh, it's so horrible, this kid, he's not doing... Yeah, but why is he not doing anything? I'm of the belief that...
What happened to him? Like, what...
He's older than us.
Yeah,
so.
but what could make someone stop?
I'm kind of the belief... I am of the belief that in 99% of cases, any issue a child has is the parent's fault. Now, once that kid's a bit older, that's up to them to fix their life, no matter how messed up it was, because I mean, what else can they do? But when it's the relationship, no matter how old they are, when the relationship is between parent and child, it's the parent's fault because, well, it's, oh, my kid's abusive and he hits me and now I'm 80 and he steals from me. It's, well, why did you not raise him better then?
Yeah.
Now, I'm saying 99% of cases because sometimes you get a commodus and
Yeah.
I don't know what happened there. I mean, maybe Marcus Aurelius was just a bad dad, but it seems kind of, he had 14 other kids that were pretty solid or something like that. So, I mean, it seems like so maybe it's 5% of cases you get a free pass, 95% then, because Marcus Aurelius had one kid out of 14 or 15 that was bad. And
why did he choose the Commodus? Did all the others die?
well, Commodus was his oldest son.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But the fact that he chose his son was a problem in of itself.
Yeah.
None of the other good emperors chose a kid of theirs.
Well, his adopted son died.
But he should have adopted someone else then.
Yeah.
Because that's what all the other emperors adopted someone, right? And
Yeah.
and he didn't, because they adopted the person that they thought would be best for the job.
Yeah.
And Marcus Aurelius didn't.
Marcus Aurelius was also dying, and his guy he adopted to take over his job died before him, and then he was dying.
His wife died.
Yeah.
Yeah.
His empire was in a lot of trouble.
He kind of had a rough life.
Yeah.
But, you know,
also, his dying wasn't very pleasant. Like, he was in constant pain for about 10 years before he died.
With China, actually, I want to clarify something about how I said, like, if someone appeared individualist, they get locked up and seem crazy. And I want to clarify that slightly because I've noticed a trend in Western media where they act like Chinese people are a hive mind. Like, so in Worm, the Chinese superheroes are this gang of, like, 30 people that actually share powers in a mind, basically. And they, like, fly in perfect formation and whatnot. And there's I don't know, there seems to be a bit of, like, China's, like, everyone's kind of, like, equal, like, communist almost, let's say, like a hive mind. But wuxia, the incredibly popular Chinese media, shows how wrong that is, like cultivation literature. Collectivism is where all you do is in service of the community. But you can be the best community service provider out there. Yeah. You can become the greatest community service provider to have ever lived.
So that's actually a bit of the difference between Japan and China. Is Japan's actually very collectivist. However, one of the reasons why their culture's getting messed up is because they tried Americanized, even though they are a collectivist society. But Japan actually also really focused on individuality, like a lot.
But China does as well.
Yeah.
Like they have, if you watch Chinese...
Well, I'm saying one of them went communist, the other went democracy. And so...
Right. Well, fascist, but eventually democracy.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, if you watch Chinese media, for example, they are not... they have heroes. Yes. It's not like the community gets together and they solve the thing like a pair of ants following their glorious emperor or something. They have heroes. They have... cultivation is literally about individuation to a degree. Like, that's not the point of cultivation. The point is to become a god, I guess. I don't know what the point of being a god is, so you can guide people. I'm not sure, but I'm not really sure what the point is other than the joy of seeing numbers go up. But...
I mean, it's very human.
But, like, Kung Fu is not martial arts. It means hard work. It's essentially the Chinese word for art, if we use art in the original sense of skill. Yeah. So what Kung Fu is you're saying you're not gifted, like you're not just like born a genius. I worked incredibly hard. I had tons of setbacks, tons of failures, and I got to this point. You watch all the old Kung Fu movies, like the martial arts ones, and it's about the person overcoming challenges and becoming strong. Yeah. That is a very Chinese thing, is working really, really hard. Yeah. Working so... And China has this thing where it's like, you... I don't know, let's say you get stabbed by enough knives, you become immune to getting stabbed by knives. Like, they have this very...
You get kicked in the nuts enough they don't...
Yeah, so that's... I think that's a performance art thing. But the idea is very Chinese, of you overcome something with mental discipline. Yes. It gets... It's funny, actually, because I've seen...
You get enough malaria, how you become immune to it.
I mean, I'm basically a... whatever you call a Chinese weeb, really. Like, they're my favorite. They make the best movies, in my opinion. And I love their culture. I don't actually know nearly enough about it, but very fascinating. But what I think is funny is there's a lot of people complaining right now about whitewashing, blackwashing, getting rid of redheads in media and whatnot. And on the one hand, I get it. Like, if I think about it, I get it. But on the other hand, watching so many Chinese films, it's like, why do you care about the race? Like, I have seen movies where all the British villains are Chinese, and all the Japanese invaders are Chinese, and all the Chinese people are Chinese,
Yes.
and all the Mongols are Chinese.
Yes.
Like, when you watch a Chinese movie, it's just make believe.
Yeah.
Like,
No, but
like Hollywood is, because Hollywood is so cosmopolitan, they have this obsession with get exactly the right person for the role. But China, like, they'll cast like the same looking 10 dudes to be a fat woman, an African, a Dutchman, a Japanese person.
In the Handsome Siblings,
Yeah.
they have that person who's quote unquote cross-dressing, and no one can figure out she's a woman.
Yeah.
And like, because she's the heroine of the show,
Yeah.
she has to be gorgeous. And so, she has her hair short and she's wearing pants. She must be a boy.
I'm pretty sure that's a joke.
Yeah, but still.
But I'm pretty sure, like...
Well, I think Handsome Siblings is a lot of comedy.
Yeah. But I mean, like, Chinese humor is very subtle sometimes.
Yes.
Like, they tend to say things completely seriously, and that's the joke in itself.
Yeah.
They kind of remind me of...
Jaghead?
Jaghead, yeah. I kind of wrote a Jagheader based on Chinese people. It's kind of... Because
I can imagine them more German.
well, the Chinese people, like, they will say things with a dead face, and you're like, whoa, and then it's like, oh, that's a joke.
Yeah.
It is really interesting when you think all people are the same, and then you see how different cultures can be.
Yeah.
Which isn't, and not even in ways that are like, oh, these people are cannibals. No, it's just, they have a totally different way of expressing themselves.
Yeah.
Like, Canadians are incredibly extroverted, let's say, for most cultures on Earth. Americans even more so. And you go to Norway, and they find it creepy if you smile at them.
Yeah.
Or like any of the Nordic countries. If you smile at someone you're on the streets, they're like, jeez. What the... And British people, they have this culture of politeness. Like, they'll invite you in and they'll hate you every moment of it.
Yeah.
And China has this culture of understatedness and also dedication, hard work.
And Russia has a culture of despair.
Yeah, and of kind of reveling in their despair. And how uniquely Russian it is.
Yeah.
And I don't even, like, India, I don't know what it is, but from what I've seen of Indians, it seems to be about being cool. Because, like, Indian people are all really cool.
Yeah.
Right? Like, they all dress really fancily. They all have cool haircuts. They're all very hip.
Have you seen any Indian media?
Like, their Bollywood stuff, it's all about being the coolest guy in the room.
And their special effects of their characters.
Like, you pop the collar on your shirt and 10 guys go flying because you're that cool. Like, India seems to be very much about being cool.
Yeah.
But I don't know much about India. And also, India is...
massive.
It's also, like, the hodgiest podgiest. It's like, they've got, like, 50 different cultures in there. Just kind of really close together in a giant country.
Well, a different culture within Canada, the Southern Shoshone.
Yeah.
Their culture is about being subtle, partly. Like, it's very subtle and very calm. Like, of their teachers who are very ingrained in the culture.
Yeah.
Like, they've always been very subtle, very calm, very...
They're also very confident.
Yeah.
Like, they state things. They don't have questions.
Yeah.
It's like, it was actually fascinating. The elder culture, it's all over the world, but it's kind of dying out to a degree in the West, I think.
Yeah.
But the First Nations try to keep it alive. And I did a sweat lodge with an elder, and it's really fascinating because I asked him, is there absolute morality?
Yeah.
Or is morality subjective? And he's like, yes. It's just like, like, he didn't hesitate. He's like, yeah, morality is absolute in all of the universe. And it's like, they just have confidence in those things. And I don't think that's uniquely First Nation. I think it's eldership more. Yeah. That all cultures have, but maybe more or less disregarded in some places, depending on where you are.
Well, I mean, this has been raised before, but it's...
The First Nations are also very humorous.
Yeah.
They're very, like, Chinese, it's like dead face, you don't know what's going on. The First Nations, it's like they trick you and then they start laughing immediately.
Yeah.
Like, it's like that sort of thing.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, how have you been? I haven't seen you in a while. So they'll say, like, what just happened? Oh, I was just attacked by a bear. Like, it's like, because obviously they weren't, and they start laughing, that sort of thing. So it's very, I mean, obviously a better joke than the one I just tried to make on the fly. But...
yeah, the comparison, though, so First Nations, And they still tend to do this to extent. It's like, oh, respect the elders, like take care of them, use their knowledge. Whereas West is throw them into an old folks' home and forget about them.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's rough because who wants to be stuck with the old people?
Yeah.
That's kind of... But and the other problem is in the West. I think the bigger problem is old people are self-sufficient in most places in the world. Like here it's like, I got to 60, I'm getting my mobility scooter and I'm never leaving.
Yeah.
Whereas Japanese people, it's like, oh, I think I'm having a heart attack. Well, I'm 80. I guess I won't come into work tomorrow. And then they're dead the next day.
Yeah.
Like, Japanese people work until like 2 years before they die, if not up to the moment they die. And Chinese people, I think it's more like you, because of their family structure, you just become the guy that like tells your family everything, you do everything for. Yeah. You just become the dude.
Well, I mean, on that note of the Japanese people working, like, so who are all the taxi drivers? They're all old men. Yeah. It's like, wait, why is every single taxi driver in Japan old men? Well, cars are really expensive to own, but some guys just like driving them. Remember
the bus driver?
Oh, yeah.
He kept saying, thank you very much, have a nice day, just over and over and over. But he was just like mumbling it. It's like, are you asleep? Should you be driving this bus?
Yeah, it's just...
You're about 170 and you're just sleeping.
Like the taxi drivers, they're technically retired.
Yeah, that one guy we got where he just like turned and then he like drove at a building.
Yeah,
there's like this gap the width of his
like
car.
You know the scene with the bus in Harry Potter?
Yeah. Yeah, it's like this gap the width of... And then it wasn't straight. It wasn't like a straight alley. He like turned and said, I swear he drove up a stair. I don't think he did, but he might as well have just driven up a staircase out. It's like... London taxi drivers are like that too. Apparently it's the hardest test on earth, the black cab test. Like harder than SAT, harder than getting to Harvard. Like apparently it is actually the hardest test on earth. I don't know if that's true, but that's what I've heard.
Well, so when I got lost and was trying to find my way back to you guys in Japan, I was asking the bus driver for directions, and of course didn't speak very good English. I don't speak English. No, this was a different bus driver than that one. And so I was trying to like say the place with all the steps.
Help me, I'm lost. Thank you very much. Have a nice day.
Well, he kind of, I think he understood the situation that's going on. And so he said, okay, basically directed me to sit down on the bus. And then we continued through our route. And then he said over the intercom something. I don't understand. Everyone, okay. Then he detoured the bus and said, okay, get out here. And I got out, and that's how I basically met up with you guys. But bus driver, like, he has his route. I was like, oh, poor kid. Get out.
Do you remember Pam, like the school bus driver? Yeah. Like so a lot of school bus drivers, I think they're just kind of getting through their life and they kind of hate their job, but it's what they can do to a degree. But Pam was like a general who was fought on the battlefield. Like she'd be like, wait, you're on the wrong bus. She'd like drive way out, or she'd be like, okay, we've got 10 people that are going to be late getting to their place, so this bus needs to come here. We'll do a transfer here, and then that bus will have to... Like, she would get on she was constantly on the intercom directing all the other buses. It's not like she had a GPS and she was in a headquarters. She's driving a bus while she's like, okay, bus 2, you should be here. Bus 3, come over here. Bus 4 and 1 will meet up, and then we'll transfer this kid to that bus, and then I'm going to just take a detour. I'm going to be 10 minutes late.
Pam was bus 1, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so bus 2, which is what we were on, was... You'd come up to your stop, and it's stop, and then it's like, oh, this is mine. You'd get up out of your chair, you'd walk up to it, get out, bus driver make sure you got off safe, and then drive. With Pam, you'd be driving along on bus 1, and people who knew her knew, but it's like, oh, we're coming up to this stop. And you would get up and make your way to the front, then you'd sit down, then she would stop for like half a second, you'd have to throw yourself out the bus.
Yeah, Pam was hardcore.
And then she'd drive off. It's like, these people want to get home or date.
But I don't know if she's retired yet or not, but she kept that thing running. Like, it's probably a mess without her if she retired.
When they transferred the whole system, it basically broke for a week and she fixed it. Yeah. I remember being on the bus when the system broke and waiting at that transfer point, and I was out there for 2 hours.
Yeah, well, when they first did the transfer, everything was a mess, and she's like, okay, I'm going to take a detour up here to pick up these kids because you're not picking them up, and then I'm going to... Like, she was... Even when they didn't have it fixed, she was the one keeping everything running. Just a legend.
It broke so bad, though, the bus system, that our mother changed the time she got off work so she could pick me up.
Oh, yeah.
Because...
It was taking you an hour to get home.
It was taking me an hour to an hour and a half to get home.
From, like... 20 minutes.
No, 15-minute drive.
Yeah. Like, you could have biked and it would be faster.
Yeah.
Probably should. Well, yeah, I guess slight danger maybe, but yeah. So yeah, Chinese ain't hive mind anyways.
Yeah.
Which goes back to white holes, of course.
Yes.
That's what we're talking about. So, black holes are a place that is so dense that space and time all go into them. Which means that... So in Star Trek, they have a moment where they get into the event horizon of a black hole, and they accelerate, and they just barely manage to break free. Now that is probably possible, because in Star Trek you can move faster than the speed of light.
And they're using a warp engine.
Yeah, that's how they do it. But the moving faster than the speed of light, so moving fast with a powerful engine isn't what saves you. What saves you is, in Star Trek, they have shown that they're able to time travel with their warp engines. They do that where they save the whales, right? To prevent the end of the world or something like that. Because time travel is the only way to leave a black hole. Because they're bending time and space towards them, it means no matter which direction you go, you are going towards the center of a black hole once you've entered its event horizon. Which I think is a kind of mind-boggling concept in some ways. Like, you can turn directly around, but there is no around. It's all towards the center of the black hole. Time itself moves to... If you sat perfectly still, and the black hole wasn't pulling on you, the progress of time would move you towards the black hole, because...
Yeah.
I mean, of course, that's gravity's doing, I guess, to an extent. But the point is, your future... You can tell your future if you're in a black hole. It's, I will end up at the center.
Yes.
Now, this takes a very long time, apparently, which I didn't think about, but... it takes like the age of the universe essentially to do from your perspective. Of course, you've been torn apart by then. But if you're indestructible, well, if you're indestructible, you'd go into the center of the black hole. That would be that, and the black hole dies, and then you're just at the end of the universe, looking around like, where'd everybody go?
Well, I wonder if you can even be indestructible and enter a black hole, because black holes destroy information.
Possibly.
Oh, right. Isn't that the only thing that can't be destroyed? So...
Well, because I don't know, because I've heard it said that information can't be, but then black holes would seem to counter that, right? Well, so there's Hawking radiation, which
no, the black holes don't destroy information. No, they don't. And the fifth state of matter is information, but that's the subject for another time.
So a white hole is an object which is the opposite of a black hole. So all time and all space lead out of a white hole. Which means the only way to enter a white hole is to go back in time after you've already been in the white hole. Because, so you have to have started in the white hole and left, and then go back in time to enter. That's the only way you can, because all time, all space leads out of a white hole.
Yeah.
Produce a massive amount of, radiation, matter, whatever it might be, all directions.
Negative energy.
Well, no, positive energy. They're the opposite of a black hole. They're just sending out... They're not absorbing everything. They're sending out energy, time, space, whatever it might be.
Yeah, probably negative energy as well as energy. Negative energy is weird.
So they, it's thought...
It's theoretical.
That a white hole might have been detected because they found an energy pulse which lasted for, I think it was 120 seconds. So when a black hole is formed, it releases this massive burst of energy.
Yeah.
And when a supernova goes off and you get a neutron star, maybe off here, you get a massive burst of energy, and we can detect these. They last for a couple seconds.
Yeah.
This thing lasted for 120 seconds. Massive sustained burst. So they think that might have been a white hole. But of course, this is where I want to get into slightly more, which is basically everything about space, but also everything in general, but space is a much more obvious example, is speculative.
Yeah.
We talk about things that we know and that we discovered and that we figured out, and it's all completely in the air. Mm-hmm. So I thought I'd talk about... you're talking about chaos, right? And white holes. So entropy is the opposite of chaos, even though they might seem similar. But so entropy is low information.
Yeah. So...
I guess you could say a black hole destroys information because it's very simple, right? Like it's... So what information is your ability to compress it. So if I say 1, 2, 1... I have a series of numbers. They go 1, 2, 1, 2 forever. I can condense that to... I have a series of numbers. They go 1, 2, 1, 2 forever. Yeah. That's very little bit of information to represent an infinite amount of numbers.
Yeah.
So a black hole, all you say is there's a black hole.
Yeah.
Whereas if you have a planet, you're like, well, there's fish and there's this and there's that and there's that. So a black hole is very low information in that sense.
Yeah.
But
until they discover the creatures that live inside them.
But if time is, to our perspective, essentially stopped in the black hole, that all those things that get crunched and destroyed aren't until potentially after the black hole's destroyed. So, no. But the information can't escape the black hole. So for all intents and purposes, it's information destruction. But with time travel or with the end of the black hole, that might not be the case.
Yeah.
So long term, it might not destroy information. But for all intents and purposes, I think that makes sense to me anyways. I'm not saying that is how it is.
I wonder if you can quantum tunnel your way out of a black hole.
Don't think so.
Well, I was more thinking eventually you're going to be out of the black hole because it will disappear.
Yeah.
And so you're out of the black hole.
Yeah, but no, you can't, because all time leads towards the center of the black hole. So that wouldn't work. I think you can quantum tunnel out of the sun. That's the only reason suns can shine, apparently, because they're so heavy that photons and stuff shouldn't really be leaving them. Yeah. But they just teleport out. They're like, yeah, see ya.
It's not teleporting. It's slipping through reality.
Well, it's taking a shortcut because you've already taken it.
Yeah.
It's not actually. It's weird because it's not actually that crazy. It's just it doesn't make sense on a macro scale.
Yeah. So you know the representation of you have a hill
to
show quantum tunneling, so it goes through a hill. It actually doesn't look like you going through the hill. Quantum tunneling looks like you going up the hill and down the hill.
Yeah, so I think a great example of quantum tunneling is a siphon.
Yeah.
You have a tank of water above another tank of water. You stick a hose in, you suck the air pressure out. The water starts going uphill because it can go down.
Well, an even better one is that liquid nitrogen in a cup.
Yeah, but that's not as accessible, right? Like, that's not something you...
But that's actual quantum tunneling.
Yeah, where the liquid... Well, I think it might be the surface tension pulling it over.
No, it's not surface tension.
Oh, right, that was what made it different from, like...
water.
Yeah.
It's cheating.
Yeah. So yeah, it's like, I think it's liquid nitrogen. You can watch videos of it. If you draw a bead of it out of the liquid nitrogen, the rest of it will follow, essentially.
Yeah.
Even though... So it's kind of hard to hold in a cup, which is...
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's... If you make it leak over. It's kind of cool. Yeah, so it's not actually that crazy. You can see it in action.
Yeah.
I mean, if you look at the sun, you can see it in action all the time.
Go look at the sun.
So...
There's many things in this world you can look at. The sun is not one of them.
So if you have... So in Jasper for 4 Days, Thursday Next series, the uncle has a device which can unscramble an egg, which essentially reverses entropy.
Yeah.
Because... No, it can unboil an egg, maybe? I can't remember. But he also has an entropy detection device, which is a shaker full of colored sand. And so what he does is, when he thinks there's high source of entropy nearby, he shakes it. And if he sees patterns, then he knows there's high entropy, because patterns are low information. Yeah. Because a random arrangement of sand is much denser and harder to describe than, like, oh, well, it alternates red and white stripes.
Yeah.
That's very easy to describe. So that's low information. So that's his entropy detector. So that's how you can look at entropy.
Yeah.
Entropy is statistical leveling, essentially, to a degree. So entropy is one of the few things in physical sciences that require time to explain, because most physics concepts are time reversible. It doesn't matter which direction time is flowing for them to work.
Yeah.
Whereas entropy actually requires what they call an arrow of time. It requires time to be moving forward to function. Because if you go backwards, then you actually have entropy decrease. Yeah. So the second law of thermodynamics is that entropy of isolated systems increase, but they do not decrease.
Yeah.
So entropy does not decrease is the second law of thermodynamics. So you say, okay, this is one of the fundamental laws of the universe. Right? Yeah. The 4 or 5, whatever they are, laws of thermodynamics. So there's a very interesting thing there, actually, which...
Doesn't the white hole violate that?
Yeah, that's one of the problems people have with white holes.
Because they spill out information? And...
Yes. They actually decrease entropy. Yes, that is a problem people have with white holes. And that's one of the reasons why they're not thought to exist, because it kind of defies what we know. But here's the thing. First of all, a really interesting implication of entropy is, let's say you go into a time machine that has a random dial and just sends you to a random time. If you have an entropy measure with you that can measure the entire universe, you take a setting before you enter the time machine, and then you enter the machine. You can determine if you went forward or backward in time. Because
white holes exist, and it turns out...
And then the whole thing doesn't work. Yeah. But if entropy is higher, then you're in the future.
Or that just sounds like the hypothetical for a science fiction book where someone's invented an entropy detector, right?
Yeah.
And they have a time machine, but they can't really choose how far it goes. And so they're going to use their...
figure out the degree of...
Yeah, so they can figure out the degree, but then it turns out they're really wrong, and they keep messing up. It's because white holes exist, and so it's messing their entropy.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, is that we have all these assumptions about reality, and the laws of thermodynamics are some of the strongest. I captured a quote from someone who said, so this was... Dear Casper, how can we abandon this law? It is not that we choose to follow it or that we created it. The second law of thermodynamics is a fundamental law of nature. It means it is there, out there. We cannot choose whether to stick to it or not. Which is wrong. It's an observed...
Yes.
It's an observation. Now, how is the observation made? Because I think, okay, it's actually very clever how the observation was made. So what the guy said was that you can't get... I'm going to paraphrase a little, but cold things don't heat you up.
Yeah.
So if entropy didn't increase over time, you should be able to pick up a bucket of ice and get warm from it. And the ice cubes should get colder. But of course, hot flows to cold. And that's how we know entropy increases.
I'm just kind of waiting for the other side of the scale where we find out that there's actual negative temperatures. And they also move towards Kelvin.
So one thing that...
Won't those be weird?
There's a science fiction book, actually, where...
Reverse boiling?
You enter the negative universe.
Yeah.
And when you go below zero. And so you enter like a mirror universe, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
It might have been Asimov, because... That's the thing. I'm talking about all this stuff, which is really interesting, but I'm sure there's a sci-fi offer that's done it already. Like Jasper 440, I've realized after reading up a bit more on the second law of thermodynamics especially, the whole uncle is just kind of a thing to play around with the idea of thermodynamics and defy it. Because he has all these devices that just totally disrupt it. And Hades is an agent of entropy, I guess. So he kind of...
Is he agent of entropy or agent of...
Well, that's how he detects them, right? Is with the anti-entropy device.
Oh, yeah.
I don't remember why he's related to entropy, but that was...
I think it's just his nature.
Because he was able to determine he'd been in his workshop by shaking the sound device and seeing the patterns.
Yeah, I think it's just Hades' nature.
Yeah. So... We have all these assumptions about the world. And I'm using the law of thermodynamics because it's one of the strongest.
Yeah.
But imagine if it was just yanked away tomorrow, right? So I was watching... people who watch Joe Scott as well might be able to tell that a lot of the stuff I talk about, it's not always... I originally see Joe Scott's videos, but he talks about a lot of stuff I'm interested in. So I kind of worry sometimes. Like there's a... It might be Saturday Morning Breakfast Seal talked about this, where it's like the Wikipedia second or so. It's the time it takes for two experts, in quotation marks, on a discussion to realize they're both just talking about the same Wikipedia article they read. So, I do actually tend to read a bit more about things that I want to talk about.
I don't know who Joe Scott is, so there can be my counterpoints to what you say.
Yeah. But also, he's just one link to things. But anyways, not to denigrate him at all, but he was talking about a bunch of possible prehistoric civilizations, not human, prehistoric civilizations, like dinosaur civilizations or other ancient human civilizations, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
He's a very science-oriented guy. And so whenever he talks about stuff, he says, I'm not saying this, there's no scientific backing for this is just a fun idea. He's always putting these disclaimers in that essentially the established narrative of science is what is correct. And any deviation from that is wrong until such point that the scientific narrative changes, which is how science works. So fair enough. But the thing is, that's how science works, and not everyone is scientists, and even scientists are humans when they're not studying science. And therefore, you really shouldn't view the world through the lens of science, because science will change, and if you make your worldview science, then you are blinding yourself essentially to reality. So Galileo, we talked about earlier, great example, where everything had been figured out. The church knew how it was. Everyone knew how it was. You'd be crazy because everything was solved.
Yeah.
And then the book, when everything stopped making sense, might have actually been about the Renaissance. Like, it was written around the Renaissance, I think, possibly. Because everything was figured out. And then people like Galileo came along and everything stopped making sense.
Well, so for a dinosaur example, have I told you my eldritch horror theory of dinosaurs? So we have their skeletons.
Yeah.
And we have pretty good guesses of what they're like. But imagine, like, a T-Rex, right? It's got these tiny little useless arms. Imagine if that's just for holding stuff near its chest. And then it's got a bunch of tentacles sprouting from its head so it can reach out and grab things.
Yeah.
Or the Allosaurus, right? Like the giant thing, like what Littlefoot is. Imagine if it had like a giant helium sack on its back. And we're completely wrong about this thing. And it sort of like hopped along and then floated with us and landed and hopped.
Well, that isn't that out of left field because... so the reason they didn't think the Tyrannosaurus Rex was a predator for a long time was because it's really, really big.
Yeah.
Elephants can't jump or they'll break their legs.
Yeah.
Tyrannosaurus Rexes are bigger, which means if so two-legged animals have way more endurance and are... they have more endurance. And they can see a lot further than other animals. The huge disadvantage to being two-legged is you trip. And two-legged animals trip all the time. If a Tyrannosaurus Rex tripped as we understood them, they would die. So that's why we think they weren't predators, because they couldn't chase anything. It would be way too dangerous.
Yeah.
However, they think that maybe they were a lot lighter than if you had an elephant that size.
Yeah.
Maybe they had hollow bones or, well, I mean, you might be able to tell with the fossil, but maybe they had a gas sack. Maybe they had... So yes, there is actually stuff like that where it's like, these had to probably be quite a bit lighter or this whole thing falls apart.
Yeah.
Well, literally, it just kind of falls over and dies. So...
We're in the local group, right? So all we can observe is the local group. And the observation we get from everything in the local group is like light coming.
What's the local group?
It's the collection of universes we're in.
Okay.
So, you know how universes are like pinwheels?
You mean galaxy?
Sorry, yeah. It's a collection of galaxies. So how galaxies are giant pinwheels?
Yeah.
So they also gather together in different groups. And then there's massive amounts of space in between each group. And so what if once you leave the local group, the rules change?
Yeah, the rules could be gravity bound. Or... let's look at it this way. If you could develop classical physics probably nearly perfectly on a flat planet. And so you could say, well, the Earth is flat and this is how classical physics works and that's that. And then you realize the world is round and that there's acceleration in space and you get relativity. Like Newtonian physics were the way everything worked. And then they were thrown out the window because it turned out Newton was entirely wrong. It's just everything he did worked.
Yeah. Because
it worked on a local scale. And we still use Newtonian physics to this day because it's so... accurate on a local scale, we might as well.
Yeah.
And it's way simpler. So stuff gets thrown out. But in Galileo's time, everything was figured out. And the church was the establishment that had everything figured out. And then that was shown to be false, right?
Yeah.
But people were following the church. They're like, yes. So I'm going to call it the left because that's kind of the discussion. But it's not necessarily... Or the progressives, maybe. But it's... I'll call it the progressives. The science worshipper. The weird science worshippers.
Yeah.
Especially with COVID, they've come out of the woodwork. They're treating science like people used to... They are the same people that back in the day would have said, the church knows that the sun goes around the earth. Like, this is already figured out. Trust the science, you weird... what do you call it? Conspiracy theorist, not job type.
You're a danger to yourself. You need to be locked in your house.
Yeah. So... what a lot of scientists keep saying is this is how it is, like that quote I read you about thermodynamics, right? It's a fundamental law of nature.
Yeah.
Science this is our best understanding, but a lot of people say this is how it is. Yeah. Now, scientists are aware, of course, that this is just our best understanding. You read a lot of scientific discussion. I was reading about the Patterson-Gimlin film and how a guy came forward and he said, I was the guy in the costume and that's that. And so they're, he was paid to do the costume. He walks exactly like Bigfoot. He's about the right height for the footage. Yeah. He described it all. All his friends said, yeah, I remember him talking about this. And so you say, well, that kind of disproves that. But the exact same skeptical scientists that say, well, Bigfoot isn't real, they're actually pretty decent at their job. Because there's a costume maker that came forward and said, yeah, I was the guy that did the costume for the Patterson-Gimlin. And so what they did was they isolated them both and they said, describe the costume. And then they compared the descriptions and they're totally different.
Yeah.
So I think skeptics get a bit of a bad rep, actually. Like the good ones actually do the work and they're like, well, one of you is lying.
Yeah.
Or both of you are lying. Or one of you has a bad memory. That's also possible.
And also, here's one of the biggest ones. Is so someone will talk about it. There's a detail a lot of people don't know about Patterson Gimlin. They only got the footage of Patty. There was 3 others.
Well, they could claim that.
Yeah, but I know, they claim that, but so there's the claim, there's the footage they have.
But that doesn't really reinforce the idea that it's real.
No, but it's still, oh, I was there. And this, so what about the other guys?
Right, but if they didn't film them, then they don't have to exist.
Well, some people say that they deceive Patterson and Gimlin. That's the
No, this guy says he was hired by them to make a fake film.
Because some of the claims is they were just they hoaxed Patterson and Gimlin. That's some of the claims.
No, this guy said, I put on the costume. Okay. My friends all know about this. Patterson and Gimlin paid me $1,000 to wear a Bigfoot costume. And yeah, it wasn't that they were... Yeah, so that's this guy's claim. Yeah. There might be others that said they just deceived Patterson and Gimlin. But this guy said he was hired by them directly. And the costume maker said I was hired by them directly. Yeah. And he said it was just my standard $435 costume that we use for our whatevers. But when the skeptics came and they described the costumes, they're totally different on both cases. It's like different material, different weight, different way of putting it on, different mask structure, different... Like, the one in the footage appears to be a top-of-the-line product, whereas a $435 costume isn't going to get you that. Yeah. So, although with the blurriness and the uptouching and whatnot, it could have been much worse and just look better now. Yeah. So, there is that. So, I do think it's not fair to say that the scientists are worshipping science, but there's these science fans that do, and they're missing the whole point of science. And so, this is normally a semantic argument, right? That, you just don't understand. You should be saying our best understanding is rather than this is how it is. But the problem is that people genuinely seem to forget every mistake of the past. So, I'd like to list a few. So, it's like, well, the science is coronavirus thing. You got to take the injection. You got to do this. You got to do this. You got to do this. So, thalidomide. Yeah. Birth control. Well, it's, we did the test, it works, you take this, now people have flippers and they're dying. Yeah. K-waves. Multiple independent verifications of physicists of this new particle type, of this new wave type. It was responsible for everything. It was produced by everything. It was in everything. Independent verification multiple times. Doesn't exist. Yeah. They were looking for it and they found it. That's also something to keep in mind with people with Bigfoot stuff. Like, even when they say we brought in an expert primatologist and they've determined this isn't any known primate, they might want it to be Bigfoot. Yeah. And so they're allowing things to slide. So that is something to keep in mind. Canals of Mars and Venus. Established. We saw them. They're there. Here's the lines. We talked about this on the last podcast. Newtonian physics. We got this. Like, we know how everything works. We got it all figured out. Einstein comes along. What if a guy fell off a roof? How would he know he was falling? Like, if his eyes were closed and there was no sound, how would he know he was falling? Mathematics. The fundamental principles of mathematics. Massive, two massive books published. Bam. This is mathematics. Comes along. This is mathematics established, ground up, flawless, boom, bulletproof. Like, the next year, Gödel comes in with a single, 2 sheets of paper. He's like, no, it's all garbage. Yeah. Now, the thing is, you can build a plane with Newtonian physics. You can determine a lot about the universe using the laws of thermodynamics. Yeah. Using math as it stands, you can determine all sorts of things. So I was thinking about this. Feet, right? Like the measurement of a foot. Oh, okay. It's made up. Yeah. It's completely arbitrary. It's made up. But the thing is, if I say something's 12 feet long, someone in India listening to this podcast can take on a measuring tape and say, okay, this is 12 feet. Yeah. So it's useful to have things, even if they aren't real, right? It's useful to have constructs. Yeah. So it's very useful to have Newtonian physics. It's very useful to have the second law of thermodynamics. I am not dismissing them in any way. It's the only way to communicate. They're very important. But you do not worship them. You do not say, how can we banish the law? It's the fundamental nature of... Yeah. So, you cannot have a fundamental based on observation. Observation is limited. We are not omniscient gods. Yeah. We're gonna... I guess we'll have to continue this after. Yes. All right. Well, let's save and pause. And we're back, ladies and gentlemen. All right, we're back. So, thermodynamics. So imagine this, right? There's a cup. All right. It's got water in it. And you're holding this cup. You say, water cannot leave the cup. Because no matter how much I hold the cup in the air, the water doesn't leave the cup. Yeah. I can move the cup up in the air, I can move it down, the water doesn't leave the cup. move it side to side, water doesn't leave it. So water does not leave cup. That's a fundamental law of nature based on observation.
Yeah.
You turn the cup upside down, everything's out the window.
Yeah.
Okay. So.
Well, actually, there's other things that don't prove this, but very quickly. So nothing can go faster than the speed of light, right? That's a fundamental rule. But what if we just can't observe anything going faster than the speed of light, and so nothing can go faster? Of course, there's other reasons, but
So a lot of these physics things,
yeah,
have very good reasons for existing. So light is a constant, not so much a speed. So if you're going 100 kilometers an hour and you throw a baseball at 50 kilometers an hour, the baseball will go 150 kilometers an hour.
Yeah.
If you're driving at 100 kilometers an hour and you turn on the headlights, the light coming out of the car will go at the speed of light. It won't go at the speed of light plus 100 kilometers. It'll go at the speed of light.
Yeah.
So I don't know what the implications of that are, but that is like with thermodynamics. You can say, well, maybe it doesn't happen, but the argument is actually very sound, which is if you grab a piece of ice, it doesn't make you warmer. So another way you can look at it. So there's two proofs. There's empirical proof and there's mathematical proof of the second law of thermodynamics, which is very simply put that over time, things average out. So if I roll a die 3 times, I might get 3 6s in a row. But if I roll a die 1,000,000 times, I'll probably get roughly the same amount of 1s, 2s, 3s, 4s, 5s, and 6s.
Yeah.
And that's entropy. Because you say everything is rolled 500 times. That's entropy.
So if you start rolling, I know this would be a weighted die, but let's say it's not a weighted die. You started rolling it, then it started coming up with 6s.
Every time.
The more you rolled it, the more 6s you'd get. So the longer you rolled it, the more
likely it was to get a 6?
Yeah.
Yeah, so,
I think we talked about this with potions before.
I don't know, but...
I had a concept for potions, which is, so, you brew... This is a chaos. Actually truly chaotic potions. Which is so, or if we put these ingredients together, we have a 30% chance of getting healing potion, 30% chance of getting poison, 30% chance of getting mana, let's just say. And so you run your experiments and that's what you get. But it turns out that you've just been getting lucky to that point. And there actually is no consistency to it and you keep doing it. And then it turns out, well, actually a completely different thing can turn up. And then sometimes it's 80% or just a run. You'll get healing potions and it changes again.
Right.
Because it's truly chaotic.
And how would you measure the change in chances?
Well, you can't.
Right, but if you wanted to implement that, or are you just saying in theory?
In theory, this is true chaotic magic.
So you're talking about magic being Robin Hobb's definition that if you can do a thing and get the same result, then it's not magic.
Yes.
Right.
Is that her definition?
Yeah.
That's what I've been looking for. That's so good. All right.
Yeah, no, Robin Hobb's good.
No, that's very much what my opinion of magic is.
Yeah.
Anything else is just...
Well, I told you about it before. If you strike a flint the first time, that's magic. If you strike it every time and you get a spark, that's science.
Yeah. Yeah, because it is just science. A lot of the science is science. But Lord of the Rings magic, Gandalf has different things happen.
Yeah. So I think if you want to... we've talked about this too, but if you want to combine them, like Sanderson... the rhythmatist, that's just science. That's not magic.
Well, besides the
quality of the image you draw.
Yeah.
Which is subjective, so that could be considered magical.
Yeah.
Yes. So there is that. So Mistborn, that's pure science.
Yeah.
There's no magic in there. In the metal burning. In other aspects like ruin, that could be considered magical. But the metal burning itself, that's pure science. Except maybe gold burning, where you see who you could be.
Yeah.
But that could just be look at every possible future, find the most likely.
Yeah.
Whereas he does a better job, I think, in the Rhythm of War, whatever that series is called.
With the pots?
No, with the magic, because it's based around 3 realms and the interaction of them. So mind, body, and spirit, right? I think. Yeah. And so there's a lot of wiggle room in there to have results that make sense, and are limited.
Nightblood is kind of magic. They made a sword to kill evil, and that's...
Well, the souls are pretty magical. They perform a task.
Yeah.
The souls are kind of ridiculous. It's you do one thing, which is kind of... if you're a god, most people can't pull that off. But
well, that's because they don't have that many souls.
Yeah. But, what's his name? Vasher is able to make the souls animate cloaks and stuff. So
Yeah.
so he's able to just kind of use them as a source of generalized energy almost.
Mm-hmm.
I was actually nuclear bombs, right?
Yeah.
It's bad when they explode, but I've never thought about it. Like, it's energy. You're converting matter into energy.
Yeah.
But it's like, what does that mean? What is energy? And it's pretty obvious, but it's all energy.
Yeah.
So a nuke releases magnetism, it releases infrared, it releases ultraviolet, it releases microwaves, it releases color, it releases heat, it releases kinetic force. It's all energy.
If you explode a hydrogen bomb above a city, it actually can be, it's an EMP.
Yeah.
It's an extremely devastating EMP.
Yeah, well, I think we talked about it last episode, actually, where I was proofing against...
Well, we were talking about EMPs. We didn't talk about nuclear weapons.
Yeah, I mentioned it briefly. But yeah, it's like all energy, which is quite...
E equals MC squared.
Yeah, but I've just never thought, like, I've always thought, heat. Like, a very big explosion, but it's not... An explosion is a kinetic force and heat, typically, but this is... And light. So, explosion contains a lot, but this is all of it, just...
Yeah.
All energy, which is kind of cool. So, where was we? We was talking about...
Physics.
Yes, but...
And the rules changing of thermodynamics. Because people think they are real, but...
Yes, so Maxwell, this physicist Maxwell, he wanted to come up with a because like I said, I think the people in the sort of edge, like your Graham Hancocks, your Bob Gimlins, they talk about how all the scientists want to hold us down, man. But a lot of them are actually very creative.
Yeah.
It's the people that declare themselves to be skeptics, the armchair skeptics, who just sit there and say, well, no, that it's much more likely. And I find that very... Romney, who was on last episode, he did that to me after the episode where I said, it's matrilineal passed down. He's like, no, it's not. That's their law. The Jewish law is that it's only passed down through the mother. That's their religion. It's like, so you can't dismiss what I said with your lack of knowledge of their religion.
Yeah.
But I'm not holding anything against Romney because, I wasn't 100% sure on it, and it's good to question things. Yeah. But the confidence and ease with which you can dismiss things is... Now, you and Romney are especially dangerous people because you can say things with great confidence. And I don't know if it's because of your long-time exposure to each other that it's like built up to this crazy level. But
we're just trying to bullshit each other much.
Well, no, I don't know if it's just more like you play off each other, because when Romney says, no, that's not true, it actually makes me doubt myself because I'm like, wow, he's saying this with authority. And then I look it up and it's like, no, this is in their code. So it is a powerful ability. It's useful, definitely. But Sitch and Adam recently were talking about the WEF, and Adam just dismissed it. He's like, yeah, it's just crazy conspiracy theory. No, it may be a conspiracy, but they literally say what they want to do. They want to take over the world. That is their mission statement that they've put out and told everyone. Yeah. And they brag about at their conferences how all the world leaders are alumni of theirs.
Yeah.
This isn't a crazy conspiracy theory. It's out in the open.
It's their theory.
It's not a conspiracy of silence even. It's just a conspiracy.
Yeah.
It's Klaus Schwab and his buddies got together and said, what if we ruled the world? And they set out to do it, and they're doing it. And
have we set up the Fourth Reich?
No. Well, yeah, it could be. But
I'm saying that because he's Germans, and they can't help themselves. The Germans have to rule the world.
Yeah, but people sometimes, and I'm guilty, everyone's guilty of this, I think, at least myself and many others are, of just dismissing things because you don't know enough about it. Yeah. Like, I used to dismiss astrology, for example. The more I learned about it, the more I'm like, oh, this is actually, like, there's some decent stuff in here. Bigfoot, I thought was kind of silly. There's some decent stuff in here. Here's the Patterson-Gimlin film, right?
Yeah.
It could be fake. It could be very well be fake. The arguments you can make for it being fake, or for it being true, you can say, look, at the time, to fake it would have been so much more expensive than the real deal, right? Like, it would have been easier to fly to the moon than to fake the... It was 2 years before the moon landing that this film, the Patterson-Gimlin footage, was taken. Well,
there's also another interesting thing I learned about it. There's a whole bunch of film before it. Because they are two cowboys.
That doesn't really...
I know, but it's just interesting. There's two cowboys, and they're filming each other riding horses, and they're going along. So that's why they had a camera, to an extent, is they're two guys just filming wildlife.
Right, but I do believe that they had done Bigfoot hoaxes before. the two guys, which really puts the whole thing into doubt. Just the fact that they were willing to do that before. Which is why you don't... If you want to be a prankster, be careful, because you might ruin your credibility forever when you see
Never
the really...
cry wolf.
And if I was like a super psychic Bigfoot, right?
Yeah.
You're the kind of people I'd reveal myself to. Just to mess with them.
Yeah.
Like, you know how Apollo cursed Cassandra? I would become Apollo. I'd be like, I'm telling the truth, I swear. It's like, no, you got us before. We're not falling for this time. No, please. Just Apollo in the background cackling. Good. So, the arguments for the Moonland footage are the same as the ones for the Bigfoot.
Yeah.
And this is actually really interesting. I was thinking about this. There's some things that are very hard to think about, like asteroids hitting Earth, pandemics existing, climate change, Bigfoot. They're all really vague.
Yeah.
Like they're not in front of your face, and therefore they're very easy to dismiss. The WEF taking over the world, conspiracy theories in general, they're very easy to dismiss, right? Because they're not in front of your face, and it's very hard to think in a term of like an asteroid hitting Earth is a very real threat, very real possibility.
Yeah.
Something that many people are very concerned about and are working on solutions for. Like NASA has devoted a whole thing to it. So they're real, but they're very hard to think about. And so it's the same mindset you need to think about a pandemic existing and what you can do to mitigate it. The same mindset you need for combating global warming. Because global warming, not only is global warming hard to see, it's in the future. It's like you don't even get... If you do everything right, you never see any proof that it happened.
Yeah.
Which is why...
Well, it's the hoax of...
2K.
Yeah, Y2K is a big hoax. It's like...
Yeah. No, they fixed the problem.
They put countless hours of overtime into making sure the world didn't stop.
So let's say the Thwaite Glacier never collapses and climate change is reversed, stopped, fixed.
Yeah.
It will never in all of history not be a debate.
Yeah. Because
there will always be people saying that it was all just big hubbub about nothing. It doesn't even have to be a hoax. It could just be, people got worked up about nothing. It was never going to be a problem.
Yeah.
And the thing is, you can't know. Maybe it never will be until it happens.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. Let Me Know, a YouTube channel. They had this great line, which was extraterrestrials visiting Earth is basically an impossibility until it happens. And it's really like he was talking about the odds of disasters that could happen to Earth, and he's like, asteroid, it's like a 1 in a million every year type of thing. It's like aliens visiting Earth, impossibility until it happens. Because there's something like the pandemic, right? Life before the pandemic, there's no pandemics.
Yeah.
Like, we know they existed. We know there was the Black Death.
We dodged the swine flu. Like, that was scary for people.
But we know pandemics exist, but they don't happen to us. Yeah. Same thing with war. Mass war doesn't exist. And to this day, it still doesn't exist, really. Like, the Russian invasion is larger, but it's still not a very big scale. But if India declares war on China tomorrow, which is a very real possibility, suddenly we're going to be thrown into a massive war.
Yeah.
And we're going to be completely... It's going to be the new reality. Things don't happen until they do, and then suddenly they were always that way. So it's very hard to think about that mindset. That same mindset is what you need to deal with a pandemic. That same mindset is what you need to think about conspiracy theories and Bigfoot and things like that, UFOs. So I find it very interesting that the science lovers, in quotation marks, are the ones denying conspiracy theories. So they're not actually science lovers, they're government narrative lovers. Because if you are a science lover, you don't dismiss things.
Yeah.
And if you are a very solid conservative type, you don't allow for the possibility of Bigfoot, pandemics, asteroids, or global warming.
Yeah.
The divide doesn't make any sense. So it's not about science, because if it's about science, then you keep an open mind to everything. It's not about skepticism, because then you keep an open mind to everything in true skepticism. So what it is this upsets the nature of the world we have right now. Therefore, I'm going to dismiss it, because that is what that's the right thing to do. That's what upright citizens do, or that's what's easier for me. So Maxwell, one of these great scientist types, actually decided he would test
with his demon.
Yes. So he said, okay, what circumstances would have to exist to prove that the second law of thermodynamics was false. Which is a very interesting thought experiment. It's like, okay, so this has been said. We don't have anything that disproves it. It's very sound. What would disprove it? So that's a good thought experiment to have about anything. Like, how would you disprove the first law of thermodynamics? Like, energy can't be created. Well, if a wizard came along and shot a lightning bolt, that'd be pretty solid.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe he's drawing it from a sun somewhere else, but then where's he getting the energy for the teleportation?
Yeah.
But maybe he can tunnel through space somehow. So there's possibilities. So Maxwell's demon was a demon invented to demonstrate, like, if this demon existed, then the second law of thermodynamics would be false. So what Maxwell's demon does is it has two objects, boxes, let's say, or it could be a piece of ice shoved against a person, and whenever so they're in equilibrium.
Yeah.
So they're the same temperature, let's say. So you have two metal blocks next to each other, and they're the same temperature. So what Maxwell's demon does is he takes, because even within equal temperature, there's still particles moving faster and moving slower. So he takes all the slow-moving particles, and whenever they bounce and they're about to transfer to the other metal block, he puts a wall in its way and it bounces back. And whenever a slow-moving particle is about to go to the block on the right, he puts a wall in its way and it bounces back to the block on the left. Whenever a fast-moving particle is about to leave the block on the left, he puts a wall in its way and it bounces back. And so eventually, he sorts it so all the slow particles are in one block and all the fast particles are in the other block. And so one has become colder and one has become hotter. And therefore, he has decreased the entropy in the universe.
Yeah.
And so he said, okay, so this demon would increase entropy. So physicists then argued against the demon by saying the demon is measuring the state of the objects.
Yeah.
Therefore, he is part of the system because it says an isolated system always increases entropy. And the demon is part of the system, therefore you have to calculate the demon. And for the demon to be raising and lowering this wall and to be measuring everything, the demon has to be taking energy, and therefore the entropy is still increasing even though he's making the one hotter and the one colder. The demon himself is losing energy to counterbalance it. Yeah. So entropy is still increasing. So then other people said, well, it is possible to measure objects without expenditure if you record them. So how'd that work? I'm not really sure how that works. I guess you could say like a silver plate can take in a particle of light and it'll be etched, and then you're measuring it, but you're not actually expending energy at all. Yeah. But the problem with that, so they said, so it's possible for the demon to just memorize the state of everything and then keep doing it. So people said to that, well, it will run out of memory. Because if the system goes on forever, eventually the demon's going to have to store infinite information. And you can't store infinite information without creating more room. And that creation of more room would therefore increase entropy. Yeah. So to that I can respond, me personally, this isn't the argument. The answer they had to the argument is way better than mine. But there's an interesting talk. There's a guy, he claims, and he has no foundation for this as far as I'm aware. Like, no substantiation at all. But it's an interesting idea, which I just like. He doesn't think memory is stored in your brain. Yeah. He thinks that in each moment, you have a snapshot of reality. So, the present is stored in your brain, but not the past. Yeah. And whenever you want to access a memory, you time travel and you telepathically communicate with your past self, and you access their brain at that instant. And of course, the telepathic communication could become harder over longer distances, right? Yeah. So the further back you go, the harder to remember. And the more you telepathically interact with someone, the more recent that snapshot becomes. Which I think is just a really interesting idea, because it would explain, like, it's not impossible, really. Like, you're just accessing the fourth dimension of your own body, right? You're just you could say you're sending your neurons back in time, which isn't...
Back to your salami slices.
Yeah, exactly. It's exactly like that. And so you're sending your neuron back in time to that point.
I drew that picture. I'm going to understand its meaning if no one else does.
So, that'd be really interesting, because human brains do seem to be able to store way more than any computer. Yeah. Compute more powerfully than any computer. So it would be interesting if there was it's not actually even external. It's just you're using all of time as your storage system. Which would also mean your memory is infinite in a way, but the access could become corrupted over time. Which I think is interesting. So the demon could have infinite storage if it time traveled, basically. But the much better argument to that is you say, look, this demon was created to disprove the second law of thermodynamics. Why would the second law of thermodynamics apply to the demon? Yeah. So And to that, the critics said, fair enough.
Yeah.
So if this demon... So really, what you're saying is, if the second law of thermodynamics was violated, it could be violated.
Yeah.
Which isn't really much of anything.
But it's important.
But it did actually... The discussion and the argument back and forth, a lot of stuff branched off of that, which was actually very useful. So the whole concept in the first place of the second law of thermodynamics and Maxwell's demon were productive.
Yeah, so on that, if...
it doesn't end, but if it's...
So, back in 1984, I think it was, or it's around that time, a Mexican or South American scientist came up with a model, and we've talked about this before, for warp travel. So, based off Albert Einstein's space-time net, he devised, using magnetic fields, actually creating that bubble in space-time of lowering one part of space-time, raising the other to create a warp that would stretch and pull to make a ship capable of going faster than the speed of light. And he made this model, and a bunch of people mocked it because it's ridiculous going faster than the speed of light, very science fiction. And even within his model, there is a massive flaw. It required more energy than the universe to make this field work. Theoretically, if you had more energy than the universe, you could make this field work.
Yeah.
So, in 2012, a group took this guy's model, and he continued working on it throughout his life. And they looked at it, and they modified it a bit, and they applied some new knowledge to it, and it requires the energy of the sun to make this warp field work. And then a little bit later, another group came along and designed the spaceship that could produce this field. The shape would have to be the generators, and it only requires the mass of Jupiter to run, like the mass of Jupiter being perfectly turned energy.
Yeah.
So, this is where we got to last time I talked about. In 2021, a group of scientists looked at this model and said, I think we can make it more efficient. In fact, I think that we can make a device that in small scale can create a hypothetical, not like simulation, but real world warp field in a small localized area. So there's a group of scientists from exploring this big hypothetical idea of that's impossible, more energy in the universe, from 2021 onwards to this day, are working on their device to create a localized warp field.
So last time we talked about the former head of Intel. What was his name?
Moore?
Yeah, Moore. Moore's Law. We talked about last episode.
Yeah.
And you and Romney talked about the physical limitations of electronics.
Yeah.
So, I didn't think of it at the time, but there was a time when computers were made with vacuum tubes.
Yeah.
And the smallest computer was thought to be about a quarter of a ton, the size that could maybe fit in your home if you needed one. And there was even arguments that you might be able to like get one that was the size of a desk type thing. Because you can only get a vacuum tube so small.
Yeah.
So when you talk about physical limitations, that doesn't actually change the argument of what the limit of computing is.
Mm.
So another example is solar panels have about a maximum efficiency of 33%, around there I think it is.
Yeah.
So that's the most amount of energy they can harvest from the sun. I mean, that's amazing, really. Like, harvesting 30% of the energy of the sun, I mean, pack it up, you're done. But, so that's the most energy solar panel technology can do. Because solar panel technology is basically 2 layers of crystal, maybe, some sort of material, passing electrons back and forth. And essentially one is empty and one isn't, and they pass them back and forth. And that creates a current that goes out, and the difference is made up for by the sunlight.
Yeah.
Because you can't get the energy out of nowhere until the first law of thermodynamics is violated. Right. So you're essentially, you got a hole that a ball's falling into, and then it chucks it down the chute, and then the hole's filled again by the sunlight.
Yeah.
That's how I understand it.
Yeah, that's pretty good, actually.
So the way you can get up to 40% efficiency, not with better technology, because the best technology they know gets you to 30%, because they can mathematically follow it. And this is why math can be misleading. Because what they found is if you have a translucent a very thin solar panel that light can pass through, essentially, the wasted light can pass through, and you stick that on top of another solar panel, and you stick that on top of another solar panel, and you stick that on top, until you have infinite solar panels, you can get up to 44% efficiency. So they think it'd be better to have about 2 layers.
Yeah.
You're not going to get to 44% efficiency. You're going to get up to like 30 with current technology or something like that.
Yeah.
But they're like, that's pretty good because we're not going to get to 33% base anyways, because that's like perfect solar panel technology would get you to that. So with the computer limitation, when Moore announced Moore's Law was dead, his company, Intel, very shortly after, announced that they had made a flash drive that was 1,000 times faster than previous flash drives. And what it did was not make it even smaller like they'd been doing over and over again. They just stacked everything. So they made their chip three-dimensional, essentially. And they were able to get 1,000 times faster. And what you'll find, actually, with Intel releases specifically, they release in 2 generations. So I don't know where they're on the cycle. Like, they're on generation 12 now, I think. Or 11, maybe. But what they do is they release... So let's say generation 8. They release it. And the nanometers... So it goes from 14 nanometer to 8 nanometer, let's say. Much smaller. And so you get much more efficiency. What the next release is, it's another 8 nanometer, but it's with much better technology, much more efficient. So that gets much better. And then they release the 6 nanometer, and then then the next generation is improved. So what they do is, I think they call it leapfrogging even. They release a better scale level, and then they make it more efficient. So computers, in theory, you could get an operating system that took half as much resources, or all the programs took half as much resources, using the same hardware. And therefore you still double the effective power of computers to consumers. So while there may be a hard cap on what electrons can do, that doesn't mean there's a hard cap on what the consumer receives from the computer. So I don't know if Moore was actually talking about electrons, because that would be kind of short-sighted given...
Well, the funny thing about Moore's Law is a joke that Moore told to his friends, and he didn't even really believe it. Is an observation he made. And then people started calling it Moore's Law. It wasn't even part of, this is my law, this idea. He's just like, it seems that every so often this happens. Like, you say that awful and lot more, and then people around the offices just start calling it Moore's Law.
I mean, yeah, but it does... Now, things don't go forever, as we've been saying, but the limitations, you can say, well, clearly, the science would show that there's a physical limitation of the size of an electron, and it's random teleportation. You say, well, no, make it three-dimensional. Start doing quantum computing.
Choose how it teleports to do your computing.
Stop using light. Use qubits. And keep switching it up. You make your gluon computer. Just use like the fundamental vibrations of the universe. I was thinking about it. If you wanted to model the universe down to every molecule, you couldn't do that with anything less than a universe, right? Because you can't model, you can't store multiple things on one thing in a sense, right? So, I mean, you can based on its configuration, I guess. But the entire universe could be a computer for simulating a universe. Like a different universe, even. And I don't know how accurate that is, but I was just thinking about that. It was kind of weird. So, second law of thermodynamics. Maxwell's demon and probability are kind of opposed, because Maxwell's demon is sorting things, whereas probability says it goes even. However, with extreme random chance, as you said, sort of, I think, when you tangent to the potion thing in a degree. If you got incredibly lucky, you could actually get warmer from an ice cube. Like, if everything, or we could die suddenly. If all the gas particles in a room suddenly went to a corner of the room, we could just die. Now, the odds are so high that it's like, if the entire universe ran like a billion times, it wouldn't happen. If you took all the time in the universe that was ever, if the entire life of the universe and a Googleplex other universes, it wouldn't happen. But it could.
What have you made this ice that caused Maxwell's demon to happen?
So what I was thinking was, if you determine a way that you could actually create this demon, then that's another thing. But I was thinking just random chance, right? First of all, what if chance is an aspect of reality, and there are people that are actually
luckier?
Like there's people that are just going to be lucky based on probability, right? Like some people are going to be luckier in quotation marks than others. But what if that's actually a property of the universe?
Well, if luck is in fundamental reality?
Similar to mass or something. Right. So that's, you could find the luckiest element, luconium, and it allows you to, you just slap it on a piece of ice and you can use that ice to heat your room. And you have to be careful not to touch the ice, though, or it'll freeze you solid. And of course the ice will run out pretty quickly because there's only so much energy in a little block, but it would be very efficient for heating your house. Because you just send all the cold air outside and take all the hot air inside. Right, so you just get your little piece of laconium, your laconium membrane. Great insulator. So,
Laconium is probably so highly reactive it's destroyed itself in the universe and no longer exists.
well, it might not be an element, it could be an alloy.
Yeah.
Like if you mix like tin and iron, you get laconium. It turns out it's just incredibly common and easy to make.
2 parts iron, 1 part tin.
That was actually something like
Exactly.
when I talked about how I loved ancient things that work so well, I gave the example of watches and bikes, like 2 very hard to make things.
Yeah.
I was thinking a much better example would be like an air balloon or like a sextant, like, you know, things you can actually make.
Yeah.
Not
Just go ahead and make a bike.
Yeah, like airplanes are less complex than bikes in some ways. So that was
Watches, forget about it.
so that was probably a really bad example on my part. But it was the idea. I mean, you could make a watch. It would just be really hard. And a bike as well. It'd be much easier to make a plane or a car. Like, there was...
Do you know watches that are reactive?
Marco Polo saw the emperor's car. Like,
Yeah.
when he went to the Chinese emperor, he had a little toy car.
Yeah.
And the Greeks had an engine that could, like, sail a little paddle boat around.
What about that thing in Alexandria? The steam theater.
Don't know about that.
So, I don't know if it's Alexandria, but this thing's actually real. And so, the doors would automatically open.
Yeah.
Because there's engines for it. Inside was a whole bunch of different animals, all made out of metal and different things. And it was all run through steam. And so they'd, like, do little animations through steam. And it's this giant museum. So, it had automatic doors back in the Greek era. You'd walk up to the door.
Yeah.
And you would trigger the pressure plate, I think. And then the doors would go... and open up, and then you'd walk inside and all the things would activate, and you could like watch a bird drink some water and a lion roar and like a hippo wallow. And
You know what I find crazy is either we're missing some stuff, which is we're missing like 99% of everything from the past, right?
Yeah.
But the emperor had a little toy car, right?
Yeah.
That he could drive around on the floor. I think Marco Polo might have even given it to him. I can't remember how it went. Maybe the emperor had it in the first place. But it seems very unlikely to me that no one ever thought,
Let's make it bigger.
what if we made one a person could sit on?
Yeah.
Like, did it explode and it killed someone and they're like, okay, let's not try that again? Or did they try it and we don't have it anymore? Or were they just like, fun toy? It's like how the Mayans never invented the wheel, except for their little pole toys.
Yeah.
And, I mean, the Mayans, it actually makes sense, because what are you going to do with your wheelbarrow? Carry it?
Yeah.
Like, while you're climbing
Put it
a
on
tree?
your really, really weird, perfectly straight, long roads.
Yeah, so Mum read a book recently where they think the Mayans might not have built that, which is quite interesting. Actually, it was...
We've been to that road.
Yeah. No, it was funny because Mum was reading about the biggest pyramid on Earth.
Yeah.
It's called the Mountain, I think, in the Mayan language. And she's talking about the Temple of the Sun and the Temple of the Moon, and this road that leads to the Temple of the Sun, and how at the right time of light, a dragon is cast where its head is the temple, and there's pools of water everywhere to sense earthquakes all around the world, these viewing portals, essentially. And she's talking about all of this, and I was like, I've been there. She's like, what? Yeah, I've been to all those places.
Yeah.
I've been to the pyramid that was the size of a mountain. And
Went up it.
yeah, but I don't remember. There's a church on top of it?
Yep.
I totally forgot about that. Like, she was saying, and do you remember the church on the top? I was like, no, I just remember climbing a mountain and then waiting for the pyramid, and then realizing we were already on the pyramid.
Yeah.
Because it's unbelievably large.
Yeah.
The road's even bigger.
Yeah. That road was a long walk.
That's a kilometer, I think.
Yeah.
Or maybe it's 5. No, it's 5 kilometers.
Yeah, it was a long walk.
Yeah.
It was a really long walk.
Yeah, I don't remember it being a long walk either. I think it was just so cool.
No, I remember it being quite a long walk.
And do you remember the pools of water? Were they there?
Yes, they were there.
Because I don't know if they were lost or not. But apparently at one point they were all full and like perfectly still. And they'd use them to detect earthquakes all around the Earth.
Yeah, no, they were quite swamped in. There's like jungle and stuff. They were trying when we were there. They were trying to restore them.
But it's...
And the temple to the left.
It was just crazy road.
And remember being at the very top with the temple?
Yeah.
And then you look down across and it's just so high.
Shame we
up.
weren't there at the equinox when the dragon comes out.
Yeah.
But you could get the idea. Like, you could see how the sun only fit
Yeah.
through the, 2 or 3 passages if
Yeah.
it was exactly lined up. It's very cool. Yeah, that's one of the... That's Graham Hancock who talked about it. And talk about him once I read his books more. But he's a fascinating guy. He's kind of like a modern day explorer. He's been all around the world and diving and stuff. He's very cool. So, this laconium, this luck thing.
Yeah.
I was thinking about that, and what if that isn't the case? What if this luck particle doesn't exist?
Yeah.
It's unlikely, but what if it doesn't exist? I was thinking, okay, so entropy is one of the only physical laws that isn't time reversible. Yeah. However, massive chance can cause things to sort into hot and cold, right? So what if things happen, time doesn't exist?
Yeah.
Because time doesn't need to exist for almost all physical laws to work.
Yeah.
Because they work in backwards or forwards, except for entropy. So what if you throw entropy and time out the window, right? Time doesn't exist. Things happen everywhere, all at once. So they're just happening in every direction, all at once, all the time. Because time's reversible. So time doesn't need to exist for things to happen. It just doesn't work because humans are enmeshed in time, so that doesn't really work in our frame. But it does work in physics. So things happen everywhere, all at once. Right. So then what happens is the more likely something is, that's called the future. And the less likely something is, that's called the past. And time is an illusion that says and time is an illusion of...
And so are pants.
So therefore the law of thermodynamics can't actually be violated because it is the same illusion that time is. So all the law of thermodynamics says is that things move from a less probable state to a more probable state. And our perception of that movement is time. So if Maxwell's demon existed, what Maxwell's demon is it's just a time machine reversing. And not only that.
Or a white hole.
If you want to build a time machine, all you have to do... If you want to build a time machine, all you have to do is make a piece of ice heat up a room. And you've built a time machine. So what if time is just the human word for probability? And more probable is what we call the future, and less probable is what we call the past.
That's an interesting theory. But we're out of probability, so I'll have to talk about that next. I was just making a joke there.
But think about it. What do you...
I think time does exist because there's black holes.
Right, but the black holes are just the most probable thing.
And then what's a white hole?
The least probable thing.
And so that's why we don't find any?
Yeah, because they're in the past. And if we see one, that's just the past in the present, because time is an illusion anyways. So time, right, is local. So if we see a white hole up here, that is the past. So that's the past. But we're next to it, so we're standing next to the past, and we're seeing the past next to us. So it's like, imagine a hex grid, right? And every grid on the map is a different year, but you can look at the other grid. And you're not looking back in history, you're just looking beside yourself. You're like, hey, the guy next to me is like 2,000 years in the past, because he's less probable than I am.
Brain hurt.
So I think, I don't know. I don't know if anyone's ever thought of this or not. I mean, obviously they have, because that's how it goes, isn't it? But...
Go take your thesis paper elsewhere.
But you can see it. This was my thought I had when I was thinking about white holes, and it.
Yeah.
And I've got a lot more pages of stuff here, but
I understand why white holes are called Maxwell's demon now.
Are they called Maxwell's demon?
Yes. In science fiction, they're called that all the time.
Really?
Captain, I believe we have discovered Maxwell's demon.
Yeah, didn't know that. But yeah, they do seem to.
That's not Maxwell's demon. That's just a wormhole.
They do seem to violate entropy. However, there are a couple solutions.
They're like the other end of a black hole.
Yeah. Of course, that would kind of violate the idea that a black hole leads to itself. But what you could say is black holes go to the end of time. Okay. And so there's an idea that the moment a black hole forms, it dies.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's an idea or if that's just fact. But the problem is, from the outside observer, this takes about the age of the universe to see. Because time is at the center of the black hole, right? So everything already happened in the black hole.
Yeah.
But light still has to escape the black hole.
Yeah.
Well, it can't. But so time, our view of the black hole, you know how time observation is relative to the observer. So we can't see that the black hole's already dead. That's going to take billions and billions of years. It's like in Planet Called Treason, where they have a kiss that lasts for thousands of years. Yeah. But relative to them, it's just a normal kiss. So a black hole, it appears and it dies. but relative to us, it's going to take the age of the universe. So after the black hole dies, then the white hole appears. So the white hole is already there, inside the black hole, and we can't see it. And then that could work, I guess, because infinite time has already taken place in the black hole and then the white hole.
Or rather, from our observation of another possibility for it being a white hole is from our observation nothing can escape, but that's because it's getting shunted out into a different spot. And it's not so much a wormhole, but it could be a parallel.
Right, but black holes aren't observed. So what happened was Einstein came up with some equations.
Yeah.
And then a guy took them. And he said there should be these things in the universe that time and space all bend towards. And he created something called, I think it was the black hole matrix, which to calculate the existence of these objects. And he's like, so there's this theoretical thing that could exist, which is basically where time and space reverse and they switch places.
Yeah.
And nothing could escape from that. It would just be a hole, a black hole. And then later they found them. Or what they think are them. Because, of course, when an astronomer finds something, they found a smudge that obeys enough rules that it's the only thing they can think of is that it would be a black hole.
Yeah.
That's the same thing why when they saw the pulse, the only thing it can be is a white hole.
Yeah.
But they don't know. They're not going to say, like, for sure it is, because white holes are more theoretical, whereas black holes, it's fairly certain. And it matched more closely, I guess. Yeah, I've just been thinking about white holes. Probably wrap it up there before my voice seppukus itself.
Yeah. One other thing on Star Trek. It's interesting how this fiction, Star Trek a lot of the time, like things they had in Star Trek's coming closer to our reality. So back in, I think it was Next Generation or it was in Deep Space Nine, there was a factory full of matter and antimatter. And it's for making warp engines and their photon torpedoes. So in the narrative, it explodes. And the explosion was so powerful, it wipes out the solar system that the factory is next to. And ripples of gravity go throughout the whole Alpha Quadrant, which is where the story takes place. And so these giant ripples of gravity affect everything. And so the writers were just like, oh, this big explosion, we want to be so big it's felt throughout the universe. So they came up with this idea of gravitational waves. Then a massive black hole formed after a huge explosion. And we experienced gravitational ripples throughout the universe, and we didn't think those were a thing. But then we saw, hey, gravitational ripples are a thing.
So, one thing that is very important to keep in mind, and is really mind-boggling. Maxwell and Einstein, and that's like the 40s, right?
Yeah.
When you learn physics in school, you might learn up to Newton. That's the 1800s.
Yeah.
The crazy speculative stuff I'm talking about, that's like a 50s thing. Physics has moved way beyond that at this point.
Yeah.
When you learn math in school, you never get past a couple thousand years ago for the most part. Even calculus, depending on who actually made it, is ancient. Like 200 years 400 years at best. But some think that it was actually Archimedes who invented a calculus.
Are you saying Gene Roddenberry had a very good grasp of modern science?
Yeah, potentially. This was stuff that was talked about. And I'm not saying that to dismiss anything you said. What I'm saying is it's amazing that all this crazy speculative stuff, it was already thought about by like the Star Trek creators.
Yeah.
And the stuff I'm saying is not new by any means.
Yeah.
If you wanted to take modern stuff and do something crazy with it, you'd have to do something like the three-body problem by Cixin Liu. I forget his name. You'd have to do something like that. And even that's using slightly older stuff now. Of course, the more recent you get, the more likely it is to be wrong.
Well, like the gravitational waves was a very recent discovery, the actual discovery of it.
But the theoretical idea of it could have existed before that.
Yeah.
So there's a Simpsons episode where Homer Simpson calculates the mass of a Higgs boson. Yeah. And his answer is correct. This was years before it was discovered. Mm-hmm. The reason it was correct is that the writer for The Simpsons is very good at math. And he calculated it to enough accuracy
that you could call it correct.
That you could call it correct. However, any sufficiently talented mathematician could already do that. What they wanted was the exact number. Yeah. Which was much harder to get. Yeah. Or at least as exact as they could get.
There's even a certain point to which one of the speculative things of Star Trek is the antimatter matter drive. And it's like, well, what's antimatter? What's this mystical stuff? And it's, well, if matter and antimatter collide, they both immediately release their energy and then some. There's actually weird thing come from it. It's like, we don't have any antimatter because our universe is made of matter. However, we can create neutrons. sorry, not negatrons, and fire them at each other and watch electrons and anti-electrons hit each other and explode. And it's a fun science experiment. And physicists have been doing that for like 40 years and giggling about it.
It's just amazing. I don't know, when you talk about warfare, like you look at warfare in video games.
Yeah.
It's very often like World War I style warfare, really.
Yeah, so, actually...
There's a video game called Red Dragon Assault. It's about modern warfare.
Yeah.
And it's like you have like these little trucks that can fire halfway across the map with like barrages of missiles.
So I remember you were talking about this for your role-playing game, just the like modern weapons you're not certain about. So I went up and I was looking up anti-material weapons, which are anti-tank weapons, and they're these ridiculously huge guns that have existed for a while, but they got more and more refined. So I found a firearm that's it's called the Lynx.
Yeah.
You can hold it in your hands; it doesn't have to be braced. And it's an anti-material rifle. And you can hold it in your hands, and it's designed so it won't send you flying, but it has the piercing power of other anti-material rifles, and it's just because of how it vents it all. And it can fire rapidly, and anti-material rifles can't. And this is a weapon people can buy.
Wow.
And it's definitely like you have to have a lot of permits to own it.
But it's, yeah, modern stuff's crazy.
Yeah, but this is a gun that if you fire it at 1/4-inch steel plates, it can go through 6 of them, no problem.
Well, tanks are coated in uranium, so you need some power.
Yes.
Which is also crazy to think about.
Yeah.
Just like, how do we make armor? Well, what's the densest stuff we have?
Yes. Well, no, what's even more insane is the force field generators, which have been under development for the past 8 years, which is basically so you fire something at a tank, and the tank has this generator in it, and so the sensors can sense things at the speed of light, and so it's looking all around, and so when this thing comes towards it, it sends out a pulse of energy and deflects it.
Jeez.
And these exist. Now, they're not useful because the detecting device doesn't work, because it's really hard to have 360 detection all the time. But they've, under very much controlled situations, they've basically like, oh, nice projectile. I'll just remove its energy from existence and send it off course.
You even only have to deflect. Like, you could even take a hit as long as it's deflected slightly, I imagine.
Yeah, no, the problem is the detector and how much energy it takes to output these pulses.
That was the thing about the anti-missile lasers. The lasers work fine. It's just, you have to hit a missile.
Yeah.
Moving very fast. Same with, but there's things that can now shoot down mosquitoes, which is pretty impressive on its own.
Yeah.
Horrifying for the mosquito, really. Like, you start feeling hot, and no matter where you go, the heat increases, and then you just burn up. Like, that's awful.
Well, your wings get cut off.
Yeah. But just think of that's horrible. Like, there's no escape. Nothing you can do. It's, yeah.
And with that,
anyways.
cheery note, thank you and goodbye.
Yeah, we'll end there. Bye.